Hey everybody, how you doing? It's me, Truth Teacher. So, you see, I'm trying to use my good camera. It doesn't seem to be taking, so I guess we'll just use this one. Whatever. Just use my computer camera. Let me see. Okay, I'm just gonna give it a few minutes and let the people who were just watching my premiere give them some time to come over. But if nobody does come, then I'll just, have a very short session. Oh, we got one person here. Whoever you are, drop a comment. Let me see who you are. Post a comment. Okay, let me see. Hey, Juju, what's up, sweetie? How you doing? I'm just giving it a few seconds for people to come over. I only have a little bit of time. Really, no, maybe just like a half an hour or so. Because I got a lot of stuff I got to do today, man. Like my life is, I'm really making a strong effort to be, to put out more content on my channel. I spend a lot of time making comments on the other people's videos, but I just want to speak to this whole nonsense, this xenophobic bullshit that's been going on. And to just share with people a different perspective, So far, it seems like you're my only guest right now, but that's okay. Well, I guess I'll just get started. I invited, I put out the invitation for some of my, how do you say, my detractors to come on and let's chop it up. I'm being accused of being anti-Black American. I'm being accused of using white supremacist talking points and all of that jazz, So now's the perfect time. I know they won't come. They can sit behind a computer screen and talk shit all day long, but when you give them an opportunity to really, step up, it's like they all pussy out, Same thing like when Cologne does his lives, and it's time, like he has a guest on and gives people a chance to ask questions. Everybody's dead silent. If he drops the link and invites them to come on the panel and discuss things with him, nobody wants to show up. Everybody's mad pussy. What can I say? Exactly. Like I'm expressing my points of view, but there's no need for any malice whatsoever, and the whole thing, the whole point that I'm trying to make is that in this world, nobody exists in a vacuum alone. So they're using this argument of Black Americans did everything on their own without any outside help from anyone. That's not the way the world works. Nobody can make that claim, not even Europeans. Europeans themselves can't make the claim that everything that they have in their culture, everything they have in their music came exclusively from them. They borrowed. The whole reason why we had European colonization in the first place is because they were desperate to get to Asia, right? They were desperate to get to Asia because there were so many things that they were lacking in their society. They borrowed a lot of information from the Islamic world. And it was the Islamic world who kept a lot of that ancient knowledge from Greece and Rome, right? So everybody is building off of each other. That's what creates the engine of civilization. Hey, Jose, what's up? I'm just dispelling these xenophobic misinformation about how culture is created and spread. Mr. T, I'm going to drop the link. Hold on a second. Let me see. Present or invite. Da, 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 da. Let me see. How do I do this? Invite. Okay, here's the link. The link is copied. Okay, I'm dropping the link. Mr. T, I'm dropping the link. If you want to come in, now's a perfect time to come. You don't have to stay a long time, but you're accusing me of hating African Americans. You're accusing me of using white supremacist talking points. Now's a perfect time for you to get in and we can discuss it. So there's the link. Click the link and join in. But Malik Bey, I don't know if I want to chop it up with him. Like, no disrespect, but dude is a little, I mean, like, really, like I spoke to Malik Bey, person to person on IG, and I had to drop the conversation because this dude started going off into Twilight Zone territory, Dude starts telling me that George Washington was black, Europeans were black. He's telling me George Washington didn't own any slaves. He's telling me that there was no slavery in the United States. Mr. T, why you pussying out, man? Come on now. You got time to be sitting here dropping comments, but you don't have time to click the link? Why, you using a flip phone? Like, come on, man. Dude, come on. Don't pussy out. The link is right there. For anybody that wants to come in and talk, the link is right there. You're pussying out right now. Exactly. This is Juju. This dude, Malik Bey, was telling me that there was no slavery. Mr. T, are you listening to this? Your friend Malik Bey was telling me there was no slavery in the United States. Malik Bey was telling me that George Washington was black and George Washington didn't own any slaves. Does that make any fucking sense? Seriously. That makes no sense. So I hung up and I blocked him, cause now like I can't have a rational conversation with you. I can't fuck with you. And the other thing about Malik Bey is like, yo, my man's head is like on fire all the time. It's like you can't talk to this man. He can't talk to you without screaming on the top of his lungs. Malik Bey did say that. Malik Bey told me George Washington was black. Malik Bey, yeah, Jose, the link is there for anybody that wants to join. I'm gonna drop it again. You could scroll up and find it, but I'm gonna drop it again. Malik Bey told me there was no slavery in the United States. Malik Bey told me that African Americans didn't come from Africa. They was already here. And that they're the ones that brought white people to the United States as slaves. That's what he told me. So then I said to him, but wait a minute now. You just told me that Europeans were black people. He said, pale people. I said, okay, so where did we get these pale people from? Everywhere. I'm like, everywhere, where everywhere? All over. I'm like, all over from where? Everywhere. I was like, my dude, if black people in America brought pale people here as slaves, they had to go someplace to get them from. Where did they go to get them? Everywhere. This is what I'm saying. Jose!
Good morning. Long time no see or hear.
Long time no see you here for right, man. Yo, my life is still, interesting. Let's just say that, man.
Well, it seems like the circus is ever expanding. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, that's my name for the collective known as the mentally and intellectually challenged.
Yeah, pretty much. Dude, you know what I realized with this whole thing? Because I mean, like you and me, like these people in here accusing me of being anti African American, claiming that I hate Black Americans. You and me, we connected back in like 2020 over that time during COVID, when it was a group of Latinos and you were one of them, and myself, who were defending Black Americans against certain people in the Latino community who were racist.
Look, true teacher, look, people have been deflecting and saying false narratives about me for years. Let me
Yeah.
just give you a rundown on some of the narratives that's been directed towards me. I have an STD. I don't practice dental hygiene. I'm broke. I'm lonely. No one loves me. I'm a senile old man. And the latest is my family is all dead, and I'm undocumented.
Yeah, because like we all know you're Puerto Rican. So like, what part of Mexico is Puerto Rico in?
Uh,
Come on.
Look, let me tell you something. When I became a YouTube creator, this is one of the things I didn't think was going to happen. But look, I've been dealing with these ops for years. Okay. Basically, their issue is this: anyone that's halfway normal, okay, and avoids trouble, somehow it bothers the bejesus out of them.
Yeah, but you know what I know? You know what I've come to realize from all of these interactions, right? Because we had our time, dealing with the Hispanoteps, right?
Mhm.
And then we had the Hoteps. This is really a human issue. And that's the thing that I think, like, well, I know for myself, you know, I grew up with this idea that people of color, quote unquote, were morally superior to Europeans because of what Europeans did to us during, slavery and colonization.
Mhm.
And I realized the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we're all capable of committing acts of atrocity.
Yeah.
So,
Now, yeah, yeah. Now, addressing the myth regarding slavery that didn't exist, then how come in our Constitution declare a black person three-fifths of a human being?
exactly.
Okay.
How does that happen? And if there was no slavery in the United States, then what the fuck are we asking for reparations for? What are reparations for then if there was no slavery in the United States?
Yeah. But the fact of the matter that George Washington was black, well, I guess if George Washington was black, I guess I'm as skinny as a rail and I have a forehead of hair.
Listen, that's when I was like, you know what? I got to get off this call because dude is like he's bugging right now.
Mhm.
But in every community, you have people who are just emotionally unwell. a human thing. It's not a black thing. It's not a white thing. It's a human thing. Now, that doesn't excuse the historical fact that people who happen to be Europeans have done an incredible amount of damage around the world and still are, you know? But it doesn't mean that the rest of us are not capable of doing damage ourselves. And this whole thing with, this whole debacle about hip hop, I mean, of all things, Jesus Christ, right? Like, all of the hatred and the vitriol that I've seen coming from people who identify themselves as FBA is the reason why I have to make a clear distinction between the people that I've encountered who identify by this term and ordinary African Americans. I can't put them all in the same boat because there's a definite ideology here. And I can't put that on all African Americans. I can't do that. So, on this particular video that I just did, that I just aired, I was talking about music, Jamaican music, because these people, they get so bent out of shape at the very idea that other people besides African Americans living in the Bronx contributed to the evolution of this thing that we call hip hop. Like, why the scorn? The history of this country in America, if you look at the history of popular music in America, the 30s, 40s, 50s, Latin people, or, Spanish speaking Caribbean people, right? Made incredible contributions to music, not only in this country, but around the globe. And for some reason, there's certain people in the African American community, not everyone, of course. I would dare say most people, most African Americans are not of that mindset. But there is a certain subset that for some reason they feel that if somebody else shines, that takes away from their light. All of these things were running concurrently. So at the same time, when mambo music was taking the United States by storm and the whole world, the same thing was happening with Black American music, or what they call race music. These things are happening parallel at the exact same time. There's that fire that was in this music, and both these people are the African descendants, but there's something in that music that came out of these African descended communities that was just filled with raw emotion and feeling in a way that European based music wasn't. Right? So it touched something very primal and organic in the souls of people around the world, and that's why they resonated with it. That's why they resonated with it. Oh, Mr. T, Latinx, no, Titi Juju is Latina. Okay? Latinx is used for people who are transgender or non-binary and they don't want to identify with a gender. Spanish is a gendered language. Okay, you have masculine and feminine nouns. Okay, so they're Latinos. They're not Latinx. I don't know why the fuck people are still using that bullshit.
You know what? I think some people are just hung up with certain labels.
Yeah.
Whatever happened with the label human being?
And that's
whatever happened to the label person? We get all worked up over these different labels. Now, when it comes to the African American community, we got to keep it real. for hundreds of centuries, they were deprived of their own identity and culture that they had in Africa.
Yes.
So they had to adopt and I had to change, adopt new ways. And then you add on top of that, segregation, things of that nature. Of course, you're gonna
Yeah.
have issues. I mean, but one thing I will say about the African American community is they've shown a great deal of resiliency, something
Absolutely.
that's very hardly seen in any other ethnic group. And
Listen,
realistically speaking, the only ones that can resolve their issues are members of the community. Now, I believe it or not, I was called to task by one member of the community, simply stating that any issues that they have, they need to resolve it themselves.
yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, only they can really solve their problem. It's not my place to fix their culture, or their society, whatever. Now, if we're all living in a community together and we're being challenged with the same difficulties, then yeah, we all got to come together and fix that because it's affecting all of us at the same time. But, the thing is that the African Americans did the exact same thing that all of us in the African diaspora did. We all came over from Africa and we ended up in new circumstances, and we had to create new cultures, new ways of being in order to survive. Now,
Mhm.
for the African Americans, what's different between them and us in the Caribbean is they were a minority and they were surrounded by a hostile majority. And so the level of terrorism that they had to deal with went way beyond anything that we had to deal with because we were a majority. So the European colonizers, they knew that they could only fuck around by so much. That's why slavery ended in Jamaica when it did, because 1831, Christmas Day, 1831, we set the whole fucking island on fire. My 5 times removed great grandfather got caught up in that shit because he was one of the hellraisers, and he almost ended up he did end up in front of the firing squad. He got saved at the last minute because his slave master showed up and like, that's my property, But they literally had him in front of the firing squad, And funny thing about it is, like, he came directly from Africa. He came directly from Africa as an 8-year-old child, and
Mhm.
his story just goes back to what I'm trying to get across to people with these videos that I'm making, is that all human beings are capable of evil because his father was a chief who made his living by enslaving other Africans or for the express purpose of selling them into slavery to the Europeans.
Mhm.
He was a slave trader. And what happened was, when he was out, waging war against one of the neighboring ethnic groups, they came into the compound and they kidnapped his son, my 5 times great grandfather, and his mother, and they kidnapped him. When his father came back and realized his son had been taken, he tried to ransom him back. And they told him, there's no amount of money that you can give us that's going to make a difference. This has nothing to do with money. This is about revenge. We want you to know what it feels like to have your wife stolen, your son stolen, and sold someplace, and you'll never see them ever again for the rest of your life. We want you to know what that pain feels like.
Mhm.
And that's how my great grandfather, that's how he ended up on a plantation in Jamaica.
Mhm.
Now, he was something of a preacher. And this goes to show like how much balls this fucking man had, because you're a slave on this plantation over here, and you got the balls to get up and leave your plantation and go over to other plantations talking about you're an abolitionist and you're preaching against slavery. The fucking balls on this guy, you know? So yeah, he was part of all of that shit that kicked off on Christmas Day when they burnt down a lot of the plantations in Jamaica, got set on fire. And then in 1834, they began the process of, emancipation. Because mind you now, this is like right on the heels of what happened in Haiti, right? So first Haiti went up, and now Jamaica shit is getting ready to pop off. They're like, oh, well, like, fuck this shit. So they emancipated the slaves, but they replaced it with another system of oppression. They got the indentured laborers from India and China to come over, and they treated those people, it wasn't slavery in the same sense as what they were doing to the Africans, but they treated those people from India and China in the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
The brutality, the physical abuse, all of that, they did the exact same thing to them. And what they would try to do a lot of times was work them to death before their indentured term was up, Yeah. But that just goes to show you, man, like we talk about the evils of what the European slave traders did. But at the same time, those European slave traders, they were not as advanced as people would like to think they were. Because there's no way in hell that they could have just marched into Africa like that and just extracted slaves willy-nilly. They needed help. And unfortunately, they had people who were there who didn't give two shits about, killing somebody from another village or another city so that they could benefit monetarily off of that.
Well, the old saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my ally."
Yeah.
That's what basically that's what happened over there in Africa. You have certain individuals who have beefs with other people from other tribes and other communities, and they just look at this as an opportunity to get revenge.
Yeah.
Not knowing that this has happened to them, it could happen to them as well. Look, unfortunately, many people have issues with dealing with anyone that does not look in any way, shape, or form like them. Look at this country's history. The way the African American community has been treated. Look at the way the indigenous peoples have been treated. Or anyone that came to the United States, trying to find a better life. Trump talking about wanting to make this country great. Look, one of the problems that this country is not so great about is dealing with people who are different.
But something, it goes beyond, even, if you really look back in the history, you got to go, even before they came here to the United States, you got to go back and look at what was happening in Europe first. Mm-hmm. Because there was no such thing as a white identity in Europe. And people were not all, holding hands, singing Kumbaya because they all had the same skin color. What they did to Africans later, they did to the lower classes in Europe first. What the English did to the Africans, they did it to the Scottish and the Irish and the Welsh first. And even when they came here to what would become the United States, when Irish people first came here, they didn't consider them white. They didn't treat them as white. But they needed to create a class structure. This whole thing about race, what is really at the foundation of it is a class structure where you have elite people on top and everybody else on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And they just transferred that over to Native Americans and Africans. So it was just classism 2.0. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. So people, because they created this ideology of racial classification, right? We all have now bought into that brainwashing. And so when we look at Africa, we say, oh, they're all black. No, they're not all black. They never had this idea that we're all the same just because we have the same skin color. Just like in Europe, nobody had this idea that we're all the same because we got the same skin color. The history of Europe, well, these motherfuckers were trying to wipe each other off the map for thousands of years.
I mean, do you want to hear the lunacy? There was an individual here that we both know about, which I'm not going to mention his name, but I mean, he's talking about, talking ill regarding the African American community, and then he goes over there with a mission to make the DR white again, when his skin color is basically the same as yours.
Yeah. By the way, whatever happened to him? What's he doing with himself?
Maybe okay. I don't know, because the last time I checked, he wasn't a Dominican citizen, so I don't know, whether he stayed or maybe he got himself deleted. I mean, who knows?
But he got married. Well, I don't know if he actually got married or if he's just shacking up, but he's got a kid.
It could be, and my sympathy goes to the lady that's with him.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Can you imagine what that must be like? Good God. I feel sorry for the kid. I hope, you know what I hope, honest to God? I hope that he became a born-again Christian and he's like out of that bullshit and he's just focusing on taking care of his kid and making a good life for himself. Because I shudder to think that he's bringing up a kid with that kind of poisonous mentality.
In an environment where being mixed is considered the norm. I mean, come on. Has anybody actually been to the Dominican Republic? You see all types of Dominicans of different hues and different shades.
You don't need to go to the Dominican Republic. All you got to do is go to Washington Heights or the Bronx. They're all there. Dominicans have taken over like Puerto Ricans. When I came to the Bronx was like 50-50 African American and Puerto Rican. At least in the section that I was living in. Now it's all Dominican. It's like, where the Puerto Ricans at?
I think some of them moved to Florida.
I think a lot of them moved to Florida.
Yeah. Which is understandable because the climate there is similar to the climate in Puerto Rico. The only thing you got to deal with the hurricanes and what have you, and it does get chilly, in some parts of Florida.
Well, yeah, but a lot of them, it's like, it's like the predominant demographic in the Bronx now, and talking about like Spanish-speaking people, I would say it's split between Central Americans and Dominicans right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that there's Puerto Ricans in Connecticut. I think there's Dominicans up there too. But I know a lot of them moved to Florida. I know that there's some in the DC area. Some of them are in the Carolinas. I don't remember if it's North Carolina or South Carolina. But a lot of them have left. Yeah. I don't know if like the crack epidemic and wanting to get away from all of that madness had anything to do with it, Because at that time I left the Bronx in '92 and I was in Manhattan. So I don't know like how things gradually change. I wasn't there to witness that changeover,
Well, my area of the Bronx, you have a large like Asian community over there. Mm-hmm. and then the next group is basically Dominican. But you also have a lot of municipal employees living up along my way.
Yeah. I know it's a very interesting demographic shift. And, this is the thing, like when we're talking about like that early period in the 70s, like the mid 70s, when, this thing that we call hip hop was evolving, like that era will never be replicated again. It can't be replicated,
Mhm.
so people really don't understand. People from the outside and who were not old enough to experience that time period, they don't understand the social dynamic that existed. And they want to bring up, oh well, there was Puerto Ricans that were racist. Like, yeah, there were Puerto Ricans who were racist, but there were Puerto Ricans who were not racist, and those were the ones who came along, and they were hanging out with everybody. There was race. There were African Americans who hated West Indians, and they hated Puerto Ricans too.
I
But
mean,
that didn't mean that all of them were on that time.
look, at one time we were both part of the Instagram group, which consisted of a lot of it was Latino, but there's also non-Latino persons that was in the group.
Yeah,
Okay, of course, you left the group for reasons that that you felt it was necessary. So
busy as fuck, man. My life was like, my life has been interesting, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like it was a multi-ethnic space that we shared, and that's the same thing in the Bronx. It was a people who were not there at that time don't understand. It was a multi-ethnic environment.
Mhm.
So, to say that black people were doing something completely exclusive of anybody else, like, come on, you're gonna have a jam outside in the community and no Puerto Ricans are gonna be there when the community is made up of African Americans and Puerto Ricans and sprinklings of other Spanish speaking, Caribbean folk. How does that work?
Look, let me tell you something. And the thing that made our group work because you had, content creators that actually used their gray matter that didn't allow them to turn to mush. You had people
Yeah,
like Protab, you have people like Radical Latino, you have Denise, you have myself, you have MK, Introvert Boricua. That was like, we were like the YouTube brain trust, so to speak.
yeah. Let me just like answer this question. Hold on. How does this thing work? Oh, sure. So Kevin is asking this thing, do you think hip hop was 50-50? And here's the thing. When we're talking about this thing called hip hop, this was something that was created on a grassroots level, right? You can't quantify it numerically. That just doesn't make sense, right? So Fat Joe made that statement. I think what he means is that in the community, we were all living together. We were all part of this thing. And at that time, the Bronx was 50-50 black and Puerto Rican or Latino. Now, that doesn't mean that every single element was, well, half of these people were Latino and half of these people were black. No, it doesn't work that way. But we can definitely see that there's certain arenas that were dominated by one ethnic group or the other. Like, for example, rapping. That was predominantly African American. There's no doubt about it. We all know that.
Um, Excuse me, true teacher. There's a question I wanted to raise. Accusing me of being passively aggressive. No, it wasn't meant to be an oversight regarding the on contact creators. I was just simply referring to the contact creators that was in our Instagram group. No, I have a great deal of respect for them as well.
Yep. Okay. Chichi Chuchu, the Jamaicans, when I grew up, were on Davidson Avenue, and the PRs were the majority. and then blacks and a few Dominicans and Cubans sprinkled here and there because they didn't know anyone else. Yeah, I think, the one good thing that I think is coming out of these conversations is that people are asking questions that weren't asked before. And we're getting a lot of information that we weren't privy to. So, like in the area where I grew up, it was split. There weren't a lot of Jamaican. I was like one of the few Jamaicans in the neighborhood. I think there were like 3 families that I knew of, right? It was all mostly Puerto Rican and African American. There was one kid in my elementary school who was Dominican, and that's the first time I ever heard, that there's this place called Santo Domingo. I had no idea what the hell that was. And for some reason, there was like beef between Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. Why? I could never figure out. But like for the most part, in the mid 70s, Dominicans were kind of like Sasquatch. You heard about sightings, but you never actually saw one yourself, until the late 70s. That's when Dominicans started showing up in, increasing numbers. But in other areas of the Bronx, perhaps the demographic shift was slightly different. I guess maybe some areas it was predominantly Puerto Rican. In certain enclaves, it was probably predominantly African American. Jamaicans were always on the Upper West, the Upper East Side, But I don't think you can say that there was any area of the Bronx that was exclusively one ethnic group or the other.
True, teacher, I have heard the same thing. But you know what's funny? It seems like now there are exceptions, and I'm not saying all this applies. But it seems like there are Dominican women that get into a relationship with Puerto Rican men, and Puerto Rican get into a relationship with Dominican men because basically, supposedly, we have a reputation of being womenizers, which to the extent it is true. Some of us are womenizers. Some of us are too much attached to the ladies and things of that nature that we have to have more than one.
Well, I mean, that's something that we all have in common in the Caribbean. That's one of our faults,
Yeah, I mean, look, I come from a family where the men were notorious to be womenizers. My father, my uncles, my grandfather from my father's side. Wow, I just decided that what, I was not going to follow their example. I'm just going to be satisfied with one female because look, just like any lady that gets with me is going to have to deal with all my idiosyncrasies and nuances and crazy behavior and so on. I have to do the same thing likewise. So it's easier just to be with one lady and then just being with 2 or 3 different other ladies and then try to figure out how to get along with all 3. It is better to stick with one.
I mean, that's the way I think it should be because, the other thing is if you got kids all over the damn place, how can you really be a father, a proper father to all these kids? You can't. And I've personally seen the consequences of what happens when you have like a guy that has all these kids all over the place and the kids suffer. The kids suffer emotionally. They really do. So I don't know, man. There's certain things in our culture that are definitely toxic and that need to be changed. So this is another reason why I don't look down my nose on any other ethnic group, because I'm aware of the fact that we all got things in our communities that are not good, that need to be worked out, because at the end of the day, man, we're all human and none of us are perfect. So even if you see some bullshit happening in another community, you can trust or believe that the same bullshit is going on in your community too in some way, form, or fashion. So ain't none of us are better than the other person. So, like this whole thing, oh, well, I created this and you can. Listen, man, at the end of the day, this shit, even if we're talking about the music, hip hop, ain't none of us own it.
Look, the
I ain't
reality.
getting any money from it. Even if we said it came from Jamaica, okay, it came from Jamaica. Where's my check? I ain't getting no check.
I mean,
You know,
truthfully told, there's a saying: there's nothing new underneath the sun. I mean, look, all these things that appear to be new, they've been existing for thousands of years.
in one form or fashion, yeah. All we did is we just recycle old things. Well, it's new in the sense that we create new things out of old materials. It's like like you make a patchwork quilt, right? You
Mhm.
got old pieces of cloth and blankets and stuff, and you cut them up and you stitch them together, and now you make a quilt. You know,
Yeah.
okay. Let me read this comment. The people at those early parties say everyone was black back then. Okay, so here's another thing. This confusion of we use these terms, but we never dig down deep. Exactly what do you mean by that? So black, exactly what does that mean? You're basing that by eyeballing someone and looking at their complexion. So-called African Americans come in every shade from the darkest brown to the lightest brown.
Mhm.
Spanish-speaking Caribbean people, they tend to skew more to the lighter side of the spectrum, but there's a lot of them that are just as dark as anyone that you'll find in the African American community, and the same thing goes for the English-speaking Caribbean. So you may see somebody and you assume that that person is African American, but in reality, they're in reality they could be Puerto Rican, they could be Jamaican, they could be Dominican. You don't know. I'll give
Or
you
they could be any part of Latin America.
anywhere. Like
I mean, real. Think about. Okay, I know it's kind of hard for some people to understand, but here in this country, for centuries, the white slave owners did engage in extracurricular activities with the slaves, and they did produce mixed offspring.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So come on, man. I'll give you a perfect example, right? Hold on a second. I want to show you my yearbook from junior high.
okay.
Okay, where's my boy? Okay. You see this kid right here?
Mhm.
Hold on a second. Where is he? Where is he? Ah, I can't find him. This is so hard. Oh, wait, where's BB? Oh, there he goes. Right here. Right here. Oh, this is really hard. Okay. Can you see him clearly?
Um, okay, are you talking about one with all the writing near the photo?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
yeah, I
he's
can see.
beside the Indian girl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look at him really close. His name is David Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on what he looks like, He's light complected. He's got dark, wavy hair. His name is late David Lopez. Looking at somebody that looks like that with a name like that, what ethnic group would you assume they are?
If you base it on the phenotype alone,
The phenotype and the name together.
African American, but for all we know, he could be Jamaican, he could be Panamanian.
Okay, but
Because they do have,
his name is David Lopez. He's got light skin and he's got wavy hair.
he could be Latino. He can be. I mean, he could be from like South America, Central America, the Caribbean.
He's Jamaican.
Okay. And
Now,
which brings me another interesting point. I love how some people love to lump all of us in the same category.
yeah,
First of all, there is a big difference between Latinos or Hispanics from the Caribbean compared to Hispanics or Latinos from Central America and South America, because our political histories are quite different. Not only our political histories, but our cultural histories as well.
yeah. That's the thing is like, that's the thing is like, you can't assume. Everybody in school thought that David was Puerto Rican. And he was forever corrected me. No, I'm not Puerto Rican. And what are you then? I'm Jamaican. They couldn't understand how a Jamaican could look the way he did and have a name like David Lopez. Cuba is 90 miles away from us.
Mm-hmm.
We've had interactions going back and forth for centuries. I got like family links in Cuba. So there were a lot of people who came from Cuba, settled in Jamaica, and had kids.
Yeah.
So David Lopez was Jamaican. He wasn't Puerto Rican. And there's a lot of people that you see them, you assume that they're Black American, but they're Puerto Rican. I had this teacher in the 5th grade. I don't remember her name right now, but she looked black. And, the kids, the Puerto Rican kids, like kids being kids, talking shit, in Spanish. And don't you know they got the shock of their life when teacher started speaking to them in Spanish? She's from Costa Rica.
Well, I once knew someone who was Dominican, and her last name was Anderson. So it's like, how the heck does a Dominican get a name like Anderson? I mean, it's quite easily.
There you go.
Maybe someone from Jamaica went to the Dominican Republic and got with a Dominican lady, and who knows?
Yeah, that's the thing is like there's a lot of, I know Puerto Ricans that got the last name Thomas.
Yeah.
We move back and forth amongst each other. So you're at a party and you're looking at people and they appear to look a certain way. So you assume because African Americans, non-white people are the majority, you assume by default that they must be African American. But that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the case. There's a lot of diversity and you never know who is who. So yeah, people might say, oh, everybody at those parties were Black, but that's an assumption. That's enough. You know how many times I beat like tickets because the police thought that I was Puerto Rican. So on the ticket, what I would do is I'd give a false last name, right? I would completely make up a name because I was a teenager. I didn't have any ID. So I'd tell them like my name was Carlos Velasquez, and I'd give them a wrong address and everything. They'd mark down for race, Hispanic. So I know that shit wasn't gonna catch me, come back to catch me anyway. But I'm Jamaican. I'm not Latino. I have Latino relatives, but I'm not Latino.
Mhm.
But if I go anywhere, you drop me anywhere in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico and I keep my mouth shut, I'll blend in.
Yeah.
So you can't assume just by eyeballing people that you know who they are. There's people that they on external appearance, you would think that they're white Americans, but they got a little bit of flavor in there.
Yeah. So true. That is so true. But of course, there's always been a lot of, deflection and misunderstanding. I mean, a perfect example of that years ago when we were on Xtina's live regarding femicide in
Hmm.
Latin America, and that's how I met Denise, and of course some of the boys, as I like to call them, got a little bit defensive to talk about, well, men get killed too, and it's like, well, we
Yeah, but
know
that's
that.
not the point. We know men get killed too, but we're talking about men killing women. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But like this is just the thing, man. This whole, I don't know. I guess there's a silver lining in all the chaos, all of this ethnic chaos that we're seeing. It's like it's an infection that's been festering for a long time, right?
Yes.
So now all of that stuff, it has to come to the surface so that it can be healed. But it's disgusting to look at, right?
Hmm.
But unless it comes to the surface, it can't be healed. So I guess the bigger lesson to learn from all of this is not to get freaked out when you see, like when you see the gangrene or whatever the fuck, it's like it's in the healing process. So the nastiness has to come to the surface so that it can be healed. And I'm just trying to do my humble little part to help that process by showing or sharing alternative views with people, different ways of looking at things, because quite often what the situation is, it's not that people are necessarily wrong, but it's that it all depends on your perspective. So you can have people who have several different points of view, and it doesn't mean that they're all wrong. They all have a piece of the puzzle. But the chaos comes when everyone starts insisting that their piece of the puzzle is the whole picture and the only picture, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
If we sit
Look.
down and we listen, then yes, there's things to be learned and to take into consideration from what everyone is saying. So,
Hmm.
even with these three-letter word people talking about Puerto Ricans was racist, well, that was part of the reality. There were Puerto Ricans who were racist.
Hmm.
And, like they manifest that even within their own community, but that's not the whole story. That's not the whole picture. And that's the problem when you take things out of context and you magnify it to make it look like that's the whole story. That's not the whole story.
Hmm.
Just
I
like,
mean,
even if we look at, these three-letter word people,
yeah.
consistently, I've never had an interaction with people identifying with this three-letter term that didn't quickly degenerate into name calling and insults and ethnic slurs.
Mhm. Look,
Am I going to go now and base that and say, well, that's how all Black Americans are? I can't do that.
I've been a content creator on this platform for almost 4 years, and I have done with my share of the mentally and intellectually challenged. Okay, as I like to call them, or as Denise would call them, the slow taps.
Mhm.
Basically, look. I encourage everybody to express their point of view. The only stipulation is that let's be mutually respectful. If you cannot do that, then you will
Exactly.
have to go. It is that
Exactly.
simple.
So I just want to read this comment. You should listen to the song called Elephant in the Room by, who is this, Raheem? Here's the other thing. With these people in the hip hop community, including some of these old rappers that their careers are kind of passe, a lot of these people aren't in a very good headspace. And they're looking for relevance. Like Lord Jamar, perfect example. He just embarrassed himself in front of the whole world with this whole flat earth bullshit. But dude is not in a very healthy headspace at all. So there's these people who at one time they were on top, and now, success has, their heyday is behind them. And they're looking at all these people coming up now, and there's a resentment. So with this whole 50th anniversary of hip hop thing, they found a way, oh well, nobody's listening to my music, nobody cares, so let me do this, online YouTube thing, and I can be relevant that way. I can make money that way. So there's a lot of people that they know what the situation was back in the day, but now they sing in a different tune because they can cash in. They can make a name for themselves again and be relevant by hooking into something. So Raheem, listen, he grew up in the Bronx just like all the rest of us at the same time. So he knows what the deal is. The Bronx was a multi-ethnic space. It was a multi-ethnic space. There was no place in the Bronx that was exclusively one ethnic group or the other. Now, like I said before, when it comes to rap, that was the arena where it was dominated by African Americans, and they're the ones who evolved it to what we recognize. They're the ones that set that template that we recognize today as rap. It's a fact, but there were Puerto Ricans rapping too. Not everybody had a big name. Not everybody blew up and became famous. All the kids in the lunchroom, we gather around on the same table, we're knocking beats and we're all doing rhymes. Everybody was doing rhymes. Not everybody became a celebrity.
Yeah.
You see, and people don't realize that what you see in the media is just a reflection of what was happening in the community. So I have this other dude, he's got a YouTube channel, and he keeps he keeps accusing me and Dr. Cologne of slandering Run DMC because we said that they didn't invent the fashion that they were wearing. But that's the truth. Run DMC did not invent those clothes. That was the way we were all dressing in the street at that time. What they did was they showed, back then, rappers, they would wear these elaborate costumes and shit, because they were trying to emulate like the like Earth, Wind and Fire and those kind of guys, right? So they'd be wearing these, futuristic looking costumes and shit. If you look at like Melly Mel and them and what they were wearing, it was showbiz. Run DMC was the first ones, they were the first ones who came out, and they would just dress the way the ordinary people in the street, in the hood, were dressing, wearing the same things that we were wearing. They didn't invent that. That was something that was invented in the street. The way we put together those different, fashion elements, the way we accessorized it, that's what we did. And they were part of the community in the street. That's the way they dressed too. They just decided, when we go on stage, we're going to be ourselves. We're not going to wear like these weird, spaceman looking outfits.
Mhm.
That's all they did. And it brought up the fact that, once again, hip hop, all the elements of hip hop culture was just recycling old things. So when it came to fashion, the fashions that we were wearing came from Italian designers. We were wearing Jordache jeans. We were wearing Sergio Valentes. We were wearing, like, we took those elements and we put them together in our own way and we created a style. But we didn't invent them. And no one can say who was the first one to rock this combination. Was it a Black American? Was it a Puerto Rican? Was it a West Indian? We don't know, because we were Chuck the Pumas. I rock Pumas. That was my stuff. The velour suits, exactly. I rock Pumas because that was the one sneaker that my toe wouldn't bore a hole in. Everything else, my big toe would bore a hole in it. So for some reasons, Pumas were like the most sturdiest sneakers I could find. But all of that stuff, we were recycling all of that stuff that was made by European designers and was sold by Jewish merchants. And if you look, like back in the 70s, what we were wearing? We were wearing those shirts with the big lapels and bell bottoms, and we were wearing some platform shoes with heels like this big and thick as hell. We were all wearing the same clothes because they were coming from the same designers. So, during the golden age of hip hop, we started the gold chains, the big gold chains. We started rocking that, but we bought that from someone else. They didn't make those items explicitly for us, but we saw it and we bought it and we started rocking it. Like I remember when who was it? It was a designer. It wasn't Calvin Klein. It wasn't Hugo Boss. It was shit. Who was it? I don't remember his name, but we used to rock his clothes a lot. And he came out with the statement that, no, not Dapper Dan. Juju. Who was it? It was a designer that we used to rock his stuff a lot back in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s. And he came out and said that he didn't intend for his clothes to be worn by Black people. Can't remember. Tommy Hilfiger. Tommy Hilfiger ain't Black American.
Really?
Tommy Hilfiger ain't Puerto Rican. But we started wearing his clothes and combining them. And we're the one that made him, nobody was talking. Who the fuck heard about Tommy Hilfiger before these kids in the hood started wearing his clothes? And then this motherfucker has the nerve to turn around and talk about he didn't intend for his clothes to be worn by us. That's when I stopped following fashion. I was like, fuck this dude. Like, I'm not going to put some Italian designer's label on my ass so that they can make money off of me and then turn their nose up at me. Go fuck those guys. I stopped wearing designer shit from that time. But it just goes to show, Timberlands were what? Construction boots. We took old materials and we recycled it and made it into a style. So everything that we had, we were children and we were pulling sources from everywhere. There's nothing new. Okay, Derek Colon and Randy said Blacks couldn't leave the projects. Mr. T, you're taking people's words out of context and you're exaggerating. They never said that shit. What they said is that before the peace treaties with the gangs, people couldn't travel all over the Bronx easily because of the gangs. You couldn't leave your block because the next block was another gang's territory, and that would create trouble. So it wasn't until after that peace treaty was signed that people were able to travel to other neighborhoods freely without the fear of getting jumped. Mr. T, you making shit up about people, man. Come on. You need to stop that. That's some bullshit. You talking about you're here for unity, but you're doing exactly the same bullshit that FBA does. They take people's words out of context and they make shit up. And I'm gonna keep it 100% real. The reason why so many of y'all got a problem with Dr. Cologne is because of his skin color. That's what it really boils down to. You see his skin tone, and that triggers you automatically, and you've got a problem with that because this is a very fair-skinned person who's making these statements. That's the number one problem you all have. You can't get past his skin color. That's the same problem that True Savior has. Can't get past his skin color. Skin color ain't got shit to do with anything. Because regardless, if you was the lightest skinned Puerto Rican, we was all getting our asses handed to us by the police.
You know, I find it very bizarre that people get hang up over stuff that we cannot control. We cannot control our phenotype. We cannot control the environment that we raised in. But the fact of the matter is, people are all hung up with the phenotype.
It's ridiculous. Listen, man, we were all living in the same challenges. When the Bronx was, the Bronx at one time was majority Jewish. I don't know, like how far back. I don't know. Jose, are you older than me, or am I older than you?
I'm older than you. In fact, just to give you an idea regarding my area, which is Parkchester. Mm-hmm. It was 100% literally white. It was meant to be a community for the men and women coming back from World War II. Okay, mm-hmm. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it was. Nowadays, you have an huge Asian contingent, plus you have some Dominicans, and then you have some African American people who live around here.
So let me ask you, Jose, so you've lived in Parkchester your whole life?
Actually, it's been for the last 7 years.
Okay, so where were you living before you moved to Parkchester?
East Harlem.
Okay, so you were in East Harlem. So you grew up like in the 60s, the 70s?
Yes. Okay. In fact, just to give you an idea, I was born during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, all right. Okay, gotcha. So, I mean, the thing is, like I'm rooted in the Bronx. What I know about the Bronx is that it was mostly Jewish. Mm-hmm. And then when non-whites started moving in, they all started moving out. The people who were classified as white started exiting in droves. Mm-hmm. My mom, when she broke up with my dad, was on the Grand Concourse. She was the first, quote unquote, black person to move into that building. And the reason why she was able to get in is because she could prove that she was a professional. She was working, she was a lab tech at Lincoln Hospital. So I remember, like, when I would come up from Jamaica to visit her, I wasn't really paying attention to people's skin color like that. But, my memories looking back, I realized that everybody in the building was Jewish, mm-hmm. except for her. And everyone in the neighborhood predominantly was Jewish, And then By the time I moved back, I came back in 1976. At that time, it was a big flip. It was mostly Black American and Puerto Rican. You know,
Mhm.
everybody else had left. There were a remnant of a few Jews who were still there, and they were mostly elderly. You know, so the fact of the matter is that they treated all of us the same. When the landlords couldn't get the money from the banks to fix up the buildings, they burnt them down to collect the insurance money. All of us were caught up in the same shit. During the Giuliani administration with the stop and frisk, we all got pulled over by the cops and arrested for no damn reason whatsoever. Because
Mhm.
the cops, at the end of the month, you knew you had to be on high alert at the end of the month because that's when the cops are coming and they need to make their quotas.
Mhm.
You know how many times I got arrested for complete bullshit? You
You
know,
know,
the
I
last, yeah,
yeah, I can just imagine. And again, it goes back, and people have an issue with anyone that don't look like them.
hmm exactly. You know, the last time I got arrested, it was over some bullshit. What had happened? I can't even remember. That was when I spent the weekend in the Tombs. Okay, so what had happened was I'm hanging out with my friend. We're on 72nd Street and Central Park West, across the street from the Dakota. Now, if you know Central Park, that's the entrance to Strawberry Fields.
Yes.
And it's me and my friend, and it's a summer night. So there's a lot of people from the neighborhood. They're sitting on those benches, out there. And the police roll up on us with sirens blaring and lights flashing. It was fucking crazy. And they start checking everybody's ID, even the old white people. Crazy. And so they get to me, they run my ID, and there's a warrant for my arrest. What had happened was I got a ticket for riding my bicycle. I was getting so many tickets for bullshit. I think that ticket was because I was coming out of my building and I'm getting ready to ride, into the street. And because I stepped my foot on the pedal on the bike while it was still on the sidewalk, they gave me a ticket for riding my bike on the sidewalk. I was like, I wasn't riding my bike. I'm getting ready to go into the street. So I forgot about that ticket. You got to go downtown and spend your whole day there only to get the ticket thrown out. I forgot about that ticket. And it was in the system for years. Yo, Cologne, what's up? It was in the system for years. And then it turned into a warrant. So I got arrested and I ended up in the Tombs. That weekend, they were doing a major sweep. They were doing a major sweep, and I was in there the whole weekend. Dude, there was a Puerto Rican guy that was in there, and he said he was on his way to a party. He was in a taxi. The taxi passed a police precinct, and the red light caught them. The cops looked in the car, in the taxi. They saw a Puerto Rican in the back seat. They pulled the taxi over. They took the guy out, and because he had a joint like this, they arrested him and threw his ass in jail. He was in there like a couple of days, like 2 days before I got there, right?
Hmm.
But I'm saying, like, the reason why they pulled the taxi over, because he was a Puerto Rican, a light-skinned Puerto Rican. So we were all getting the same fucked up treatment. None of us were getting over easy because of skin color. Puerto Ricans were getting shot by the cops just like African Americans were getting shot. We were all dealing with it. Dude, I was on Fordham Road one time coming back from a party, right?
Yes.
It was like 3:00 in the morning, Fordham Road. And at that time, I lived in Manhattan. I was living on 15th Street at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming back home. It's me and this Puerto Rican dude. We sitting there, we're waiting for the D train. This off-duty police officer, mind you now, this was like 2 weeks before some, Puerto Rican guy in the Bronx got shot by the police. I think they were like these Puerto Rican dudes. They were playing like football in the street, and the football hit the cop car by accident, and they freaking shot the kid. Shot him. So this is like 2 weeks later, and now the judge had ruled that the use of deadly force was justified. Right?
Wow.
So we're there in the subway, and this off-duty cop, he sits down beside us, and it's obvious that this dude is like drunk and high. Long story short, he was making sexual propositions to us. He wanted us to come over to his house and have a threesome.
Really?
Listen.
So basically, he thought that you swung that way.
He didn't care. It's not that he thought we swung that way. Is he was going to exercise, because he was a cop, he was going to exercise his power over us and make us do something that we didn't want to do. And we were terrified. He says to the kid, well, once I stick my dick in your mouth, it's all going to be all right. And we were like, oh! At that second, the subway car pulls into the station. We ran inside. And this dude, he is furious. He's furious. And he's chasing us through. We're running from car to car to get away from this guy, because we don't know if he's strapped or not. And if he pulls the trigger, it's going to be his word against ours as to what goes down. So we got to another car, and the door was locked. And so we jumped off, and the train pulled away, and, that's how we got away from him. But there's so many, dude. You know how many times I've had police officers deliberately try to run me over? How many times I was choked out by police officers? We all got the same fucked up treatment.
Mm-hmm.
None of us had it any better than anyone else. So this idea that somehow or another Puerto Ricans were reaping some benefits that black people wasn't reaping, no, that's not the way it went. They looked at all of us like we were garbage. We were scum.
Yeah.
We were scum in their eyes. So, like I said, the whole thing I'm trying to do with my channel and the comments that I make is that I'm trying to draw attention to the fact that this infighting that's going on over this issue of who made music and who didn't, and who was a part of this culture and who wasn't, it's ridiculous. And it's disappointing to see people that you assumed would know better because they have a history of struggle the same way you did, but they're doing things that are just as evil as them folks that have been oppressing all of us. It's really kind of hard to wrap your head around. But when you take race out of the equation, you recognize the fact that race is a distraction, it's the illusion. The real issue is that it's the human mind that's the problem. It's not the skin color.
And
It's
let
the
me
human
yeah, and
mind.
let me tell yeah, and let me tell you something too, teacher. As far as who did what regarding hip hop, that's not a concern I have. Okay, I'm gonna be 63 years old this coming October, unless the Lord has other plans for me. Okay, so my thinking, I'm planning to retire within 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about, well, with Orange Man in the White House, how that's going to affect my 401k.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Or like the fact that you have U.S. citizens being deported illegally out of the United States and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to hear any member of the mega sheep cult complaining about the situation is bad and how did they invoke for this. Yes, you did, because this is type of stuff that that he was talking about doing. I have more important things to worry about. I mean, things like paying, making sure that I'm okay, making sure I'm healthy, uh, making sure that when I retire, that I'm able to enjoy my retirement in
Mm-hmm.
relatively peace.
Exactly. The things that really matter. And, like I said, the whole thing really is that racism is just classism 2.0. It's
Mhm.
really a system that was created by the elite to create division so that they can maintain their hold on power.
Yeah.
So they got all these people fooled into thinking, oh, you're white just like us. And now they're learning the hard way that that was all just a smokescreen to shut you up and to buy your loyalty so that they could do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And now everybody look, I knew this motherfucker was coming back in 4 years. I said it in 2020. I saw it coming. And I told everybody back then, invest in Vaseline because you're all about to we're all going to get it. Like fasten your seatbelts because we're all in for a bumpy ride. So, people are connecting the dots. This is the same man that told all those poor white people in West Virginia that he was going to bring coal back. This is the same person that told he was going to build a wall. He ain't done none of those things. Coal ain't coming back, and has he told these people anything about bringing their coal mining jobs back? No. He's
Well,
busy
and
talking
and
about
don't
tariffs.
and don't forget that he was gonna bring down the price of eggs. He was gonna bring down the price of groceries. I mean, and
Yeah.
that the war with Ukraine is going to be solved on day one.
Yep. Hey, Cologne, you want to jump in on the live? I'm gonna put the link in the chat if you want to join us for a few. I'm not gonna be here very much longer, but it would be cool if you jump in. Oh, Malik Bey, here you go. Black America, okay. North America been going through the same things, not just Black Americans in the also blah 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 blah. Black American people all over, all all throughout North America, been going through the same thing. Not just Black Americans in NYC. Our struggle is the same from coast to coast because we are one. Nobody's denying that. But Malik, you're the guy that told me that there was no slavery in the United States. You're the guy that told me that George Washington was black. Isn't that true? You told me that. So if there was no slavery in the US, why do we need reparations?
I'll give you one. If there was no slavery, how come in the Constitution indicated that a black person was 3/5 of a human being.
That's what I want to know. Okay, so Mr. T, there you go. Malik just admitted it. Malik told me George Washington was black and there was no slavery in the United States. He told me George Washington didn't own any slaves. He just admitted it. So I wasn't making that shit up. This is what your boy told me when we were speaking, person to person on Instagram.
Do you know how many of our presidents actually owned slaves at one time? Washington, Jefferson, Andrew Jackson. I mean, please.
Okay, so there you go. Yo, hold on a second. Mr. T, are you looking at this? Because the original 13 colonies was black Europeans. This is what I'm talking about. This crazy shit, this Twilight Zone shit right here. So, Mr. T, what's your response? Mr. T, the link is there. I told you, come on and chop it up. You don't want to come in. You over there acting mad pussy for some reason. You accusing me of hating black Americans. You accusing me of using white supremacist talking points. I'm right here and you don't want to talk. I'm giving you. Malik's your brother, but yo, there's something off with him. Malik, you see what he says? The 13 colonies was black Europeans. So are you going to correct him on that or are you going to go along with his bullshit? Mr. T, do you believe that George Washington was black? I'm asking you straight up. You say you don't want to come in. I dropped the link there. You could come in and chop it up with me person to person. You don't want to do it. You still here. You got time to be here in the chat. We've been here for a minute now. So answer the question. Okay, Malik, your brother or whatever, but he's over here talking this Twilight Zone shit. Do you believe, are you on that same time? You believe this? All right, so then tell your boy that. Your boy be bugging. You need to, you and your boy, you need to have a conversation and straighten his mind out. Because, he's smoking that dust. Why you want me to come to Mario Day so bad? I got a life, I can't be running all over the place. I'm taking time out of my life specifically to go to the TBB anniversary celebration. Why don't you join me there? I'm not a social butterfly, man. I don't got time like that. Come on now. I try to reason with everybody. I have nothing. Listen, you got two people right here, right now. You got TT Juju and you got Jose right here. And they can verify that I've been the one on my channel defending African Americans to the hilt. When people was coming out trying to talk greasy about African Americans and all of that bullshit, I was the only one I was there in the forefront, defending African Americans and their history and their achievements and all of that. All you got to do is look on my channel and see how I handled those people. So I want to know, what is it that I'm saying, that what white supremacist talking points am I making? I'm just bringing out the fact that every single culture borrows from other cultures. And I expressly said on Cologne's lives, not once but twice, even though African American artists borrowed elements from Latin musicians and Latin rhythms, that doesn't mean that it's not African American music. because they use their artistic genius to incorporate those elements into the music in such a way that it worked. It was marvelous. You can't do that. You can't take something from another culture and another element and blend it together and make it work unless you really know what you're doing. Those African American musicians were geniuses. That's why they were able to do it. And they did it in such a skillful way that you don't even realize it until somebody points it out. Those African, James Brown, all those people, those Motown artists, they were not racists. They were artists, and artists draw inspiration from many different sources. Mr. Cologne said we don't create our music. Is he right? Derek never said that you didn't create your own music. He never said that. But I'm gonna keep the live going so that he can come in and he can speak to that himself. He can speak to them. I've never heard Cologne say that Black Americans didn't create their own music. What he has said is that they borrowed elements from other cultures. And that's true. You can hear it. The video that I just dropped previous to this live, I took 2 clips from his videos, and you could clearly hear those Latin percussions. But that doesn't mean that that was Latin music. That was music that was made by African American artists who borrowed Latin influences, and they did the same thing that everybody else did. The point that I'm trying to make is that African American artists were artists just like everyone else, and they did the exact same thing that every artist all around the world did. So how does that statement diminish Black Americans in any way? That's what I want to know. How is that a white supremacist statement?
You know what I think is the problem, true teacher, is that people use terminology and phrases, but they don't really fully understand the meaning behind it, okay? And the fact of the matter is they have several opportunities to get on the platform and defend whatever they're saying. The fact that they chose not to, I think, speaks volumes about themselves.
Okay, let me look at this. Very good point. Truth teacher, you're mad at Black Americans because we are not agreeing with Puerto Ricans being co-creators, bottom line. We're not mad at Black Americans. What we don't appreciate is FBA. And once again, I make a clear distinction between the FBA and Black Americans. And the reason I do that is because of the kind of language that people who identify themselves as FBA constantly use when referring to people who are not of an American lineage. The way they talk about Africans, continental Africans, and Caribbean people. That's what, when you're calling people Tever, when you're calling people Puerto rats. Come on, that's disgusting. How do you call somebody a rat? And you accusing us of creating disunity? What kind of unity is that when you call somebody out their name and you refer to them as a filthy animal? How is that creating unity? How is that creating mutual respect? Now, I've heard things that certain Jamaicans say, like I heard when Busta Rhymes came out and he said that thing that hip hop came out of Jamaica. And I made a video in response to that. And I said that as a Jamaican who was born in the Bronx, who left and grew up in Jamaica and then came back to the United States, I don't agree with that statement. And I gave the reasons why I don't agree with that statement. That was the first video that I made on this whole thing, question of hip hop. If someone makes a statement that you don't agree with, you deal with that individual. You don't go and shit on an entire community of people. And that's the problem. So the fact that so many of these people who identify with as FBA just vomited all of this garbage, it means that there's a certain segment within the population that's always had these negative feelings towards Caribbean people and Africans from Jump Street. And that's an infection that comes from the overall toxicity of, the white American power structure. You've internalized it and you've become infected by it. And now you're turning all of that negativity onto us. So you can't do it to the white people. So you take all of those talking points that those white nationalist supremacists have used against black people in general, and now you turn it and use it against Caribbean people and people from the African continent. And just because they're immigrant people who say stupid things does not give you an excuse, because people everywhere say stupid things. There's stupid people everywhere. There's fucked up people everywhere you go in the world. You're not going to escape that. Name of our music genres from the early 1900s now are co-created facts with very little influences, and FBA is not a hate group. Where you get that from? I already told you that. I'm not getting that from Cologne. I'm getting that from my own experience with people who identify as FBA. And as I said, Mr. T, like I said, there's people in every community who say and do fucked up things, because human beings are imperfect. And everywhere you go in the world, you're going to find human beings who are fucked up. And they say stupid things. And they talk out the crack of their ass. Everywhere you go, you're going to find that. So when you meet an individual like that, you deal with that individual. You don't turn around and slander a whole community of people. And that's what FBA does. And that's the problem. And I base my opinion on FBA based on what they show me. I have never been on any video or any live hosted by someone who calls themselves FBA where I didn't immediately, as soon as they find out what my background is, they start calling me Teva. They start calling me Coconut. They start coming with the cultural put downs. Why you gotta put down Jamaican culture? Oh, Jamaican, what is Jamaican culture? Jamaicans don't have no culture. They wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for. Why you gotta go through all of that bullshit? Everybody has a culture. Jose and TT Juju, they can tell you for a fact, for years, I've been the one here on YouTube defending Black American culture. And what I say is that Black Americans don't have a culture. They have several unique, distinct regional cultures.
Excuse me, but that is true. I mean, look, when you think of the African American community, okay, you have several segments of that community that's separated by regional differences, cultural differences, and other differences. Okay, so you compare African Americans from, say, the Northeast, and then you compare them to the South. It's completely different.
Yeah. They have their own thing. And I've been saying that for Yo, Jose, you're my witness.
Yes.
Were we or were we not on lives on Radical Latino's channel, on Extina's channel, where I would be arguing with African Americans who were coming on there saying that Black Americans didn't have any culture?
True. Very true.
It
Very
was
true.
that one
But,
dude,
but
I
you,
forget his name,
but
the
you know,
one with
but,
the high pitched voice that be screaming all the time. What's his name? The one that be saying all the bugged out things all the time.
you mean Roy Chess?
Huh?
Do you mean Roy Chess?
Roy Chess. Oh my God, Roy Chess would be on there saying the most ridiculous, the most fucked up things. And he's African American, but he'd be on there saying the most fucked up things about African Americans.
Well, look, there are certain individuals that appear to have self-hate. Maybe, I don't know if that applies, but I can testify the fact that you have defended them on many occasions, on Radical Latinos Lives, on Extina's Live. I would say even on Denise's lives as well.
Yeah. Okay, so look at this comment right here. Beat active, you come from Spaniards. You see, this is the kind of bullshit that I'm talking about with these FBA people. Mr. T, you say that you're not FBA, you don't identify with their ideology, but every time you open your mouth, you're saying the same kind of divisive bullshit that they be saying.
Okay, and speaking about Latinos or Hispanics or whatever you want, or whatever you want to call us, our culture comes from Spain, Africa, and the indigenous people. Okay.
Exactly. So what if they come? Oh, listen, I got Spanish roots. I got Spaniard ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of African Americans who do too. We're a blend of people. It's just a matter of percentages. So Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, they have a higher European percentage than most African Americans. But African Americans also have European ancestry. So you telling dude he comes from Spaniard, what's that supposed to mean? That Spaniards are subhuman? Is that what you're trying to say? This is what I'm saying. Like the message that I'm putting forth on this channel is that none of us are inherently better than anyone else. We're all human beings, and all human beings are capable of committing evil acts. Mr. T, right now, you're engaging in evil speech. You're engaging in evil speech. If you have an axe to grind with Beat Active, then you raise your issues based on his talking points. Why you got to talk about his ancestors? You don't even know who his ancestors are. He could be majority African descent for all you know. You don't know. But because he's coming from a Spanish speaking background, that means that he's somehow. And here you acting all fucking brand new. Dude, what did I say? That's evil. Why? Let me ask you something. Why did you find it necessary to tell Beat Active, you come from Spaniards? What the fuck is that supposed to mean? What does that mean? Even if he was 100% Spaniard, so motherfucking what? What does that mean? What you trying to say? What's your point? That's what I'm talking about. Was that a compliment? You told him he comes from Spaniards. Is that a compliment?
Was I referring to myself?
No. Another guy in the chat, his name is Beat Active.
Okay. Mr. T, I would suggest that you get off of social media, go seek therapy to deal with whatever trauma or delusion that have led you to be in this way, and just and get help.
I didn't see where. Well, let me scroll back in these comments. Let me see what Beat Active actually said to you. Because another thing y'all motherfuckers be doing is taking people's words out of context. So I see he's talking here about, the first slaves were from the Dominican Republic, which is true because the Dominican Republic was ground zero for all of the slave trade and all of that bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
There were, okay, so here it is. Be active. Mr. T. Mr. T, are you, I guess he was trying to say, are you saying that the FBA didn't come with the Spaniards in 1526? So basically, what he's talking about is the fact that there were black people, who came with the Spaniard conquistadors. Some of those conquistadors who came were black people because before they came to the Americas, they had made contact with Angola. They had diplomatic relationships with Angola. So yeah, there were Spaniards, there were people living in Spain who were of African background before, was it Spain? 1492, let me think. They were in Portugal, they were in Spain. Yeah, they did have contacts. So yeah, I mean, like Cortez, definitely, I know that there was a few people who were definitely of African background who were on those ships with the conquistadors when they came to Mexico. That's a historical fact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not an insult to you. That's a historical fact. Roy Chess. Oh, Roy Chess. Welcome, Roy Chess. Hey, Cologne, what's up, man?
Who's Roy Chess?
Okay, Roy Chess is from a different community group on YouTube that me and Jose and Titi Juju belonged to, when we were hanging out with Radical Latino and Xtina,
Oh, okay. Okay.
And Roy Chess, you're one of those African Americans that I would be checking because you would be saying some outrageous stuff about Black Americans, even though you Black American yourself. And I would be bumping heads with you because you'd be talking, like Black Americans ain't got no culture. And I'd be going toe to toe with you on that. But glad to see that you're still here and you're doing all right.
First of all, I just want to say it's a pleasure to meet you. Doctor, is it Dr. Cologne?
Yeah.
Yes. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Actually,
you.
I first heard about you regarding your exchange with another YouTube creator known as Latin Splaining.
Oh yeah. I never heard from her again.
That's his daughter.
Okay.
Private daughter.
Yeah, I never heard from her again, but that's okay. That's okay. I hope she's doing well.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm gonna be perfectly honest. When it comes to like hip hop and who created the hip hop or whatever, I'm not the most knowledgeable in the world. So I'm not gonna make any statements other than the fact that, part of it comes from the African American community and part of it is from the Latino community. Other than that, I really don't have a lot of knowledge. So
Right.
I have to plead ignorance.
Yes. So, I offered Mr. T in the house to jump in here and chop it up with me. I just dropped my video looking at, this whole thing, like FBAs coming at Jamaicans and saying that, Jamaicans don't have any culture. We don't have any music. If it wasn't for Black Americans, we wouldn't have any music. And, I just dropped a video talking about that. So I decided to have a quick live. And then, a couple of days earlier, I had another video that dropped. So, I was giving people the opportunity to just jump in and chop it up. Mr. T wants me to go to the Mario Day celebration. Do you know when that is?
I don't. No, I don't. I know it's in the summertime at some point. I don't know. Keep in mind, Mr. T was born by his own admission, he was born in 1985. And I think he doesn't live in New York City. So 85, he's born, 95, he's 10. I mean, what is this guy talking about? Like, he's an 80s baby. I really can't understand where this guy's coming from and what his point is. Crazy.
Well, you know what the problem is, Dr. Cologne, is that people, it's very easy to express a point of view when you have very little or no knowledge. Now, unlike I was born in 62. Mm-hmm. So, and I was born and raised in New York. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's just that my type of environment, I grew up in East Harlem. So I have a different perspective. I don't claim to know everything regarding hip hop. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm not going to go out and make statements without bringing any evidence to support my claims.
That's right. That makes sense, right? That makes. Hold on, let me prop my phone up. That makes sense, So, Mr. T, I would love for you to come and join us. I think Titi Juju is right. You're afraid to reveal your identity. You don't even have to cam up. Just come on in, because you're saying a lot. You're accusing me and Randy of saying things about the project, whatever you're saying, right? But you have no skin in this game, bro. You're hearing people talk about this after the fact, way after the fact. So I mean, I don't really even know why you're in this conversation, but it's cool, it's okay. But and then you ask me why I blocked you. Well, I'm not going to continue to allow somebody to continue to disrespect me, and you think I'm just gonna, that's just foolish. So no, I'm not entertaining you. There's nothing to entertain. You're getting all your information from all kinds of people, and they say they were there. I say I was there. And when I say there, I'm not talking about the jams. Of course I went to jams, but I'm talking about the Bronx. I was there. I saw the beginnings of it. They say they were there. They saw it. The reason why you won't accept what I'm saying is what Truth Teacher said. It's simply because of my skin tone. That's the reason why you won't accept anything I'm saying. So it is what it is. But come on in, Mr. T.
Mr. T was born in 1985?
Yeah. 1985.
Yo, hold up a second, man. Hold up a second.
In 95, he's 10 years old.
But you know something, Dr. Cologne, just to give you an idea how crazy this is. I was born in 62.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to be 63 years old this year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm. Okay. But I don't claim to know everything about hip hop. Okay. Right. But I'm being transparent.
Right, because that wasn't your scene, right? So yeah, I totally get it. It wasn't your scene, but this kid, it definitely wasn't his scene. He doesn't know what he's talking about. What are you showing us?
This dress code is decades older than Mr. T. I literally got clothes. I literally got clothes that are older than Mr. T. Yo.
It's crazy. I can't see the chat for some reason. I'm not sure why I can't see it.
Um,
I think
are you using your mobile device or a computer?
I'm using my mobile.
Okay.
Maybe if I turn my screen this way, let me see. I should be able. I thought I could see it. Let me get on screen. Well, I could see the comments, but I can't see. But I can't see them on the screen. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, you don't need to see us.
Yeah.
I mean,
There you go.
Dr. Cologne, this is a collective which I refer to as the circus because they act like a bunch of clowns, or it's a term that true teachers heard me say was the mentally and intellectually challenged.
Unbelievable. um, I think it is what it is. Me and Truth Teacher have been around this corner for a while now, and I saw Malik Bey is in there. I saw, get Malik Bey up in here. Let that dude get up in here. He's a yeller. He loves to yell.
He loves to yell. That look.
Come on, Malik. Let's go.
I had a conversation. Look, no disrespect, but he's on some Twilight Zone shit, man. Like, for real. This dude is telling me that the 13 colonies were founded by Black Europeans. George Washington was Black and he didn't own slaves, and there was no slavery in America.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's a Moor, so apparently that's what the Moors believe. You know what I mean? So okay, all right. Well, that's insulting to the many Africans and African Americans that lost their lives during slavery and during the transatlantic slave trade. That's an insult to them and their memory. So, keep believing it, bro. You do that.
But then here's the thing. If there's no slavery, then why are we having this discussion about reparations then?
Exactly.
Excuse me, gentlemen, I'll give you one better. If slavery didn't exist, how come in our Constitution a Black person was considered 3/5 of a human being?
That's right. Facts upon facts. Facts upon facts. Right? So, whoever is denying slavery, by the way, we are the descendants of the slaves. You want to try and continue to push us out of the picture altogether. Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Cubans, we're the descendants of the slaves.
Listen,
and so,
Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Brazilians were the last to abolish slavery. That means that when African Americans were free, Puerto Ricans were still in slavery. Puerto Ricans and Cubans were still living in slavery when African Americans were free. That's one of the reasons why there's such a high retention of African elements in the Cuban and Puerto Rican cultures, because that stream of population was coming well into the 19th century.
Yes.
Up until the abolition of slavery, just about.
Yeah. It's the colorism thing. I heard you talking a little bit earlier about the colorism thing, and this is a social construct that was created by the oppressor of us all, and divide and conquer on the basis of skin tones and skin colors and labels and titles, and you're Black and you're white and you're this and you're that. Well, that's a social construct that we're using amongst ourselves. You got and I've seen the debate. You got the darker skinned Latinos constantly talking about the lighter skinned Latinos and the lighter skinned Latino, so we're buying into the construct that that they have set up to divide us. We don't have to. They don't have to do nothing to us. We're doing it to ourselves, and that was the point. Like we don't have to take a shot. Let them do it. Let them argue and fight amongst themselves. You know, they are of the opinion of, you know, they don't know who they are anyway. So let them fight amongst themselves. We give them their identity. We tell them who they are. We tell them what they are. We put a name on an application, and we have them check a box to identify themselves. Well, you know, and people keep buying into this lie. Listen, I'm a human being first. Before I'm a Puerto Rican, before I'm a human being. And it is what it is. So I'm not buying into the lie that a lot of these guys on this chat are buying into, that, you know, we are, you know, we're racist based around the color of our skin. And come on, man, stop that. We're having a conversation about an event in history that took place in the Bronx, and nowhere else, and it didn't happen anywhere else. It didn't start anywhere else. That's what we're having this conversation. So, I mean, you know, Mr. T, come on in, and my good friend Malik Bey, come on in and join us.
I wanna address this comment here. He says, my best friend who Spanish told me how bad his people were treated by white Latino. I want to address this thing. Listen, you have to understand that these countries in the Caribbean, just like the United States, were European colonies. Okay, right. And they created the exact same power structure.
Mm-hmm.
So who's on the top? It was the Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else was under them.
Mm-hmm.
So why should you be surprised? I mean, you're not surprised that there's racist white people who treat, you know, racist American white people who treat Black American people in a negative way. Why should you be surprised that there's racist white Spanish-speaking people in those islands who treat Spanish-speaking Black people
right
negatively? It's it's the same structure that was imported all over the Americas, all of the colonies. It was the same thing, because the European colonialists were making their money on the backs of the Native American and the African people. So they created the same class hierarchy structure. So that doesn't, you said all that to say what? That don't mean a damn thing. That don't mean nothing. So just because white Americans treat Black Americans like crap, does that mean that you're on that same time as white American racist people? Does that make sense? That don't make no damn sense. You know?
True teacher, I don't think these individuals are going to come up, because if they come up, that means, guess what? They're going to have to defend their statements and come up with some sort of semi-evidence. So they're not going to do that.
Yeah. You know, that's the thing. It's like, Mr. T, we're not all the same. Exactly, Mr. T. That is my whole point. We're not all the same. So you can't look at somebody just because they come from, you know, their roots are in a Spanish-speaking island, and make the assumption that they're all the same. Even if they're very light complected, it doesn't matter. You can't just put everybody in one box and say, oh, well, you speak Spanish, and I know somebody who says blah, blah, blah. That means it. No, you can't do that.
Right.
You cannot do that. That's right. The problem. This linear thinking is the problem. And that's the issue that I have with people who identify as FBA. Puerto Ricans are not all the same. Exactly. That's the truth. All Puerto Ricans are not the same.
Yeah. And
Yo,
I'll submit to you as part of the Puerto Rican diaspora, we are quite different compared to the Puerto Ricans that were born and raised on the island, because our own experiences and cultural differences are different.
exactly. And it's different even according to what class you're in. We're not all the same. Even when we belong to the same ethnic group, we're not all exactly the same. It depends. Yo, Malik Bey is here. I'm gonna let him in. But yo, Malik, I'm gonna just say, if you're gonna be here, you're gonna talk, you're welcome. But the second you start screaming and carrying on, you're out, man. I'm willing to have a cordial, respectful conversation. Yo, Malik, what's up? Is your mic on?
Yeah, do you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, peace, brothers. How y'all doing?
Good
Sometime I'll be
afternoon.
What's up? Listen, let me say something to you. Can y'all hear me?
I can
Yes.
hear you fine.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
I sound loud because I'm not, you know, if I sound too loud, let me know.
No, you sound a little low actually right now. Okay, speak up.
What I want to say to y'all is this. I don't think I do. What's this?
I can't hear you.
I don't know.
Get closer to your device.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you better.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. What I'm saying, try it, so I'm getting closer. I'm right. I don't see you talking, man.
Because you're speaking, I'm listening.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to figure this. Okay, what I'm saying is this. I'm born and raised in New York City. But why I don't see you talking?
He
Don't
keeps
worry
breaking
about
up.
it. I can hear you. You're like you're fading in and out.
Yeah, can't really hear him. Try going out and coming back in.
Okay, might be
Try
connection.
try that.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, what I'm saying is this.
Damn, you're cutting out again.
It's
It's like I can hear you for a few seconds, and then as soon as you start talking, it's like you go out. Jump out and come back in.
Mr. T, where you at, bro? Come on in. Come on in, Mr. T.
Mr. T is here. Akeem is here. Yo, Akeem, I got the link down there if you want to chop it up.
Akeem, come on in, bro. He don't want nobody to know who he is. That's my Akeem's problem is he don't want nobody to know who he is.
Akeem,
Come on,
the link
Akeem.
is there. Jump in. Join us. Now's
Come
your
on, my
time.
Historia. What are you holding in your hand? What is that?
That's the speaker, because he was going in and out. I was like, let me hear it. Put the speaker to my ear so I could hear him.
It could be that his internet connection is very weak. So sometimes, if that's the case, the audio could be coming and going.
Okay, he's back here. Well, hopefully he's got a good connection now. Yo, you're back. What's up? Malik.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, just speak. Hopefully, you don't go out again. Are you on a computer or like what kind of?
I got my own. Yeah. Wow.
Maybe if you get like closer to the computer.
Nah, try to go on your phone, man. Do it on your phone.
Yo, can you come back in on your phone?
You know what? Yeah, I guess I'll do the phone, man.
Okay,
Yeah, it
so
might be
jump
better.
out, come back in on your phone, and I'll let you back in.
Okay. Okay. That's
All
what
right.
I'm doing.
All right. So, listen, my whole thing is this whole vitriol is unnecessary. The fact of the matter is, why should
Truth.
anyone be insulted?
Truth, your head is cut off. Yeah, there you go.
Well, everybody tells me I've got a big forehead, so I figure I had lots to spare.
Okay. Go ahead.
The thing is that why should anybody be insulted at the idea that there were people of other ethnic backgrounds that helped create this movement? Even if you want to say that this was all Black American culture, and like I know that you Cologne, you make a strong point that it wasn't exclusively Black culture. Me, I have a slightly different opinion on that. To me, it doesn't matter to me which way, because at the end of the day, to me, it's irrelevant whether it was a Black culture or not, because at the end of the day, the fact is that you can make significant achievements in a culture that's not your birth culture. The fact of the matter is, no matter how you want to categorize this thing, there were West Indians and Spanish-speaking Caribbean people who had definite contributions into the evolution of this thing that we would eventually call hip-hop.
Right.
So even if it was 100% Black culture, these Caribbean people came in and they did something that was special and noteworthy. Just like if we look, for example, at like the convention of acting. Theater doesn't come from Africa. That comes from Europe. But I dare anybody to tell me that there haven't been African Americans who have done revolutionary things in the performing arts, in the society.
Right.
Even to the point where they had to fight for the right to be able to participate. But they still did things that revolutionized the performing arts. Their contribution was so powerful that it inspired people around the world. It doesn't matter that they didn't invent every single aspect of it or not. It's what they did. So people get the shit twisted when I point to the fact that jazz came out of European marching band music, and that those jazz musicians used European instruments. It doesn't matter. It's what they did with those instruments that matters. And in the same way, what Latino people contributed to American music as a whole was significant. Marching band music. And it doesn't take anything away from anyone else. It doesn't matter. Okay, hold on a second. What they did with those instruments that matter. Hold on a second. How do I mute here?
I think there's an extra tap that's open. That's why you have to delay.
Okay, that's not on my end.
No, it's not.
Okay, so okay. All right, so listen, we got Malik here and he's been trying to get on a lot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mute like everyone else to see like where that background is coming from. All right, Malik, you're here. Welcome to my platform. I don't often do this, but hopefully I can hear you and you can hear me.
Shalom, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Hopefully you got a clear connection.
Am I coming?
Oh, for fuck's sake, really? Damn, okay. Yo, I'm trying to give the brother time to speak, you know? I'm trying, but
Yeah, he probably
I
needs
know,
to go
but
outside.
I know, but in all fairness, to teacher, this live been going on for almost 2.5 hours, and I'm sure
yeah,
you
yeah,
have things to do.
that's true. So,
Okay.
yo, Jose, thank you for stopping by. If you need to jump out, you know, I'm glad to have you here. It's like, I know this is like a rare thing for me to do, you know, but I'm glad that you came here and you contributed.
Well, thank you very much. If I can just plug my channel just a bit,
Yeah, go ahead, plug your channel, of course.
because I have a YouTube channel called Uncommon Sense with Jose Negron. And what I do is I discuss everyday issues and we try to find common sense solutions. It's an open forum channel where everyone is allowed to express their views. The only stipulation that's being mutually respectful. I will be live tonight at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'll be talking about what you need to do in order to be a content creator and be a successful one. Because I've been a content creator for almost 4 years. It's a small channel. It's not as big as To Teacher, but it's growing.
Your channel is like you be putting in that content, man. For real, it's like my content is like lacking in love. You know, so I'm trying to make an effort to put more content on my channel and engage. So I had a little bit of time today. I said, let me, you know, jump in and do a live. You know,
Well,
so
in any case, I will drop down. Dr. Cologne, it's been a pleasure meeting you finally. Hopefully, at some point, perhaps you'll consider checking my content.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to go check it now, actually, but I'm going to wait.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and have a good afternoon, people.
all right, man. You
All
too.
right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Peace out. So it looks like it's just you and me, dude.
Teacher, I think we all.
But you know, oh, and I lost him. Well, I guess you know what. We have been here for a minute, and I do need to do things. Malik, I'm sorry that the connection didn't work out. I'll try to do another one. I can't say for sure when I'm gonna do another one, but thank you for at least making the effort to communicate with me. I do appreciate that. And look, I'm gonna just end it by saying this. At the end of the day, I don't have an axe to grind with any ethnic group whatsoever. Yeah, Malik, listen, man, like for what it's worth, I appreciate the fact that you did try to communicate with me, and I'm sorry that the connection didn't work out, you know, honestly and truly. And I just want to end by saying this. I don't have any axe to grind with any ethnic group whatsoever. You know, the things that the positions and the opinions that I have with regard to FBA in no way, shape, or form reflect how I feel about African Americans as a whole. But here's the thing, man. At the end of the day, like I keep saying, we're all human beings, and all human beings are capable of doing negative things or positive things. And just because you come from a background where you've experienced persecution doesn't mean that I'm going to turn a blind eye if I see you doing something that's evil spirited. And the interactions that I've had with people who identify as FBA, with the exception of, I'm going to say, two people, with the exception of two people who I connected with on Dr. Cologne's live, it's all been negative. It's all been people shouting and yelling and cursing people out and calling people out of their names and looking at just the nasty, mean-spirited things that they say about other people who are not African American, is why I categorize this as an online community of hateful people. And I refuse to put African Americans as a whole in that category. If I have a beef with somebody or a disagreement with somebody, I'm going to address that individual. I'm not going to throw the whole community under the bus. I don't do that. So it really does grieve my heart when I see the hatred that a lot of these people who call themselves FBA have towards Caribbean and African people. So my thing is, instead of accusing me of being anti-Black, my question to anyone who identifies as FBA and say that you don't have racist attitudes towards non-African Americans, when you see those FBA people saying those hateful things, do you check them? Because I sure as hell know, and the people here in my chat will testify to the fact that if I'm on a panel and I hear people saying grimy shit about African Americans, I check them. Even if they come from my ethnic group, I check them. I don't let anybody speak grimy about anybody in my presence. Whether you're talking about Latinos or Africans or African Americans or anyone else, I don't allow that shit. You don't do that shit on my time. I don't tolerate it. Mr. T, it doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not. If I'm on a panel and somebody who started talking grimy shit about African Americans in front of me, that shit does not fly. I wouldn't tolerate that. So what I'm asking you, when you're in those spaces and FBA are saying grimy shit about Caribbean people and Africans, do you check them? Do you correct them? And tell them that what they're doing and saying is wrong? Mr. T, Roy Chess is an African American. And there you go again. Why are you telling Roy Chess to go back to his country? And Akeem, here goes the link. I dropped the link for you. You could come and talk to me. But this is what you do. You just drop these statements, these bullshit. Cologne's channel is full of anti-Black. Anti-Black what? What is he saying that's anti-Black? You accuse me of using white supremacist talking points. There goes the link. You can click the link and you can talk to me directly and call me out on the white supremacist statements that I'm making. But you're not going to click the link. You know why? Because you pussy. Sorry, it is what it is. You pussy, my dude. Because you know that what you're saying is bullshit. There's nothing that I'm saying that is anti-Black or anti-African American or white supremacist in any way, shape, or form. But you yourself, you harbor this kind of negativity in your heart, and you go and you twist things that people say to fit your narrative. Here goes Malik Bey again. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's try it one more time, yo. Malik, what's up?
I'm trying, man. It's like, can you hear me?
Yo, sometimes technology be like that, man. It's a great thing when it works, but it's a pain in the ass when it doesn't. Man, I see your mouth moving, but I can't hear anything.
You know what? I guess next time if I, because this is crazy. Can you hear me real good now?
I can hear you now. Why don't you? Okay, so here's the thing. Don't yell, but just speak in a loud volume, okay?
That's the part. That's why you hear me yell. I got money,
Oh man, it's like the connection is the connect. I don't know. It's the speaker on your computer.
Let me see something.
I don't know what it is, man, but the connection, there's moments where your voice comes in very strong and clear, and then it just goes out.
How about
I don't know what it is.
okay.
Are you using your TV as a speaker?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, that's a problem. Like I could hear you really good right now. Can you like disconnect and just use your computer?
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. Am I yelling?
No, I can hear you fine now.
Yeah, my computer is connected to my TV.
Okay, so then that was the issue. It's like the TV wasn't picking up your voice well.
Okay, what I'm gonna say shalom to everybody.
Okay, shalom to you too.
This is crazy.
Okay, so like you got the floor right now, man.
Okay, what I'm gonna say this to you. Most people, they don't know the history of the Americas. They speak on their tribal Taínos. They speak on they speak on Taíno. They don't know there's other tribes that was here in America. And they mostly of like my family coming out of the South. Which was spoken in, and my great grandmother, she was chopped out in Alabama. A lot of people, the first time I heard of slavery was the movie Roots. I remember going back to my grandmother in the 70s that movie came out, and I asked her, "Oh, we slaves?" So I never heard that before. In my family, we never heard this slavery stuff. The movie Roots came out. People want to see the story that's told. And remember, the movie Roots was written by Alex Haley. He was sued for that movie by woman. He was sued. This is documented. This ain't what my opinion. My opinion means nothing. There's a lot of people are waking up to realize that slave story was bogus. Even some of my sisters in Jamaica, what you call Jamaica, now claiming they've been here for years. And that Jamaica is a corporation. Are you familiar with that?
I know that it was a colony. Of course, it
So,
was a
the
corporation.
original 13 colonies was in the United States. So what was the name of the rest of North America? What was the name of the rest of North America in the original United States? You know the original United States. 13 colonies.
Okay, gotta get closer to your computer again.
I know. This is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I'm going to say this. The original 13 colonies was the United States. Then what was the rest of North America?
Well, before there were the 13 colonies, there were different Native American communities. But listen, I'm going to say this to you. You have your perspective.
No, documented.
Listen, I'm going to say this.
Documented, brother. My opinion means nothing. My opinion means nothing.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna just tell you straight out, we're
No,
not gonna agree on we're not going to agree on this point.
Okay.
I'm just
So
I will say this. I will say this. I respect your right to have your perspective. I don't share it. I'm not going to go out of my way to try to convince you to see my perspective. I'm going to respect your right to have your own worldview, and I will respect that. I will respect that. That's your perspective.
I don't talk. I talk through. Document. I don't talk. We don't do that.
Like I said, I will respect your right to hold your position, and I'll leave it there. I have my position based on my culture and what I have.
But this is my opinion. This is fact.
Well, I'm talking. I know for a fact that my 5 times great-grandfather came directly from Africa. And because I know somewhat of my culture from Jamaica, I know the elements that we have there that come directly from Africa. I know the elements in our vocabulary, in our language that comes directly from Africa, our spiritual traditions. That's what I know. That's what I grew up with. So once again, you're not going to convince me on this point, but I am going to respect your right to hold your position.
I respect your right to hold your position. All I'm saying is respect my position like I respect your.
And I can do that, and that's what I'm doing.
And it's the same thing in hip hop. Black Americans are saying respect our position. If we can show you the history, how this evolved, how hip hop evolved out of Black American.
Oh shit! What happened? Hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry. Well, here's the thing. Like I said to you before, and like I said to Cologne earlier, I don't make such a big deal over how you want to categorize it. I can understand when people say they see it as Black culture. I can understand why they say that. I can understand that perspective. I can understand why somebody else, they come with a different perspective and they say, well, it was Bronx culture or American culture. And like I said to you when we spoke personally before, you can have different perspectives and you can all be right at the same time. It just depends on how you're looking at it. So if someone says that it's Bronx culture, that in no way, shape, or form negates what Black Americans brought to it. Because that cannot be done. Okay, you can't take any way, shape, or form. You can't take Black Americans out of the equation. Okay. It just can't happen.
So since we are talking Black, do you know that the language that we spoke in hip hop come out of Black American, or is not that?
Well, that's one area where I agree to a certain point.
What's a certain point?
To a certain point, yes, a lot of the slang, because here's the thing, slang changes from, over time. So yes, there's a lot of the slang that was used that came from African Americans, because look, at the end of the day, if we say that Black Americans, Puerto Ricans, and Caribbeans created this together, isn't it just logical that African Americans brought cultural elements with them? They didn't come empty-handed? So you see, I don't see why we need to even have that discussion, because to me, it's just common sense.
It is common sense. It is common sense. Some people don't take that common sense.
Well, like I said, it depends on how they look at it. And people, but yo, listen. I'm gonna mute your speaker for a second, because Akeem is coming in and I want to be able to have a one-on-one with him just like I did with you. Because I'm getting ready. Yeah, I'm getting ready to bounce anyway. Well, finally you're here. What's up?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very loud and clear.
All right. You said I was a pussy?
Well, I had to do that. Obviously, it worked. You're here now, right?
Hey, man.
That's what I had to do to get you here.
No, that's not why I came, boy.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
You're here now.
So what?
So you're
right.
officially depussified. You're here now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's up? You're talking to the white supremacists.
No, I didn't say you was a white supremacist. I said you use narrative. You use white supremacist narratives while telling other people that they're using white supremacist narratives.
So give me an example now. You got me. I'm here.
All right, I'll give you an example. Let's see.
Give me an example.
One of the things that white supremacists do is try to diminish Black American culture by saying, "Oh, you didn't create that. You don't have the capacity to create that." That's what it really means. So when you say, "Well, you didn't come up with that. You didn't come up with the English language. You don't have a FBA shoe factory," all these type of arguments are white supremacist arguments.
Okay,
They've
so
been white supremacist arguments for centuries.
Okay, so let's hold there, right?
All right.
Because when I say things like that, you're taking it out of context. I'm trying to make a point. Because listen, you got
go ahead.
I'm trying to make a point. Because the people that I come across who are called FBA will attack Jamaicans and Jamaican culture and say, you don't have any culture, you didn't create everything. Everything you got from Black Americans. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say is, okay, so let's use that logic. Mm-hmm. If we're going by that logic, then Black Americans didn't create anything, because jazz most definitely grew out of European marching band music. All the instruments that are used in a jazz orchestra are European instruments. So by that logic, if we're going to use that logic, would it make sense for me to say that jazz is not the creation of African Americans just because they started off?
All right, hold on. This is why I don't come on a live, because there's 5 different responses to what you're saying, and there's no way for me to keep track of all the 5 things that you just threw out there. No, I know, but this is what I'm saying. This is why I like to use text, because I can spell out the 5 different problems with what you're saying, and each one deserves an hour conversation. Okay, this is why I use text.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What are the instruments that make up a jazz band, a jazz orchestra?
This doesn't matter.
That's because my point.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Hold on a second though. It doesn't matter unless what you're trying to say is, well, you blacks didn't really create shit.
But that's exactly the point. That's
exactly. But that's what I'm saying. That's what you're saying. Hold on. You asked me a question. That's what you are saying.
I'm making a stupid. Listen to me. I'm making a stupid statement to make a point.
But you're on a video and nobody knows you're making a stupid statement.
Listen to the context of what I'm saying. I'm making the context. Just like the FBA will come to me and say that Jamaicans don't have any culture because they took something from Black Americans.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Let me get this to you. Hold on. Before I forget. See, you're gonna say 10 different things. Hold on. You're gonna say 10 different things. Real quick. The reason why is because there's this massive myth about Jamaicans bringing hip hop culture from Jamaica. There's books. There's movies, documentaries, all types of media, and a 50-year anniversary to crown the 3 Godfathers. There's all of this stuff. There's nothing in reverse. What's in reverse? Some comments. You understand that? So when you have this gigantic mythology written in books, in media, in articles that's fabricated, people going around doing college lectures, then you're gonna get a response that
Okay,
says, wait, hold on a second, hold on. Oh, wait a second. We're gonna look into this, and we find out that toasting was really inspired by Americans, by Black Americans. So because of that,
no.
we're gonna say, you know what? It's the reverse. And is it 100% the reverse? No. But so what? I'm making a comment.
But here's the thing.
No, there is no thing. You need to recognize, hold on. You need to recognize how the culture's been distorted and given to special magical Jamaicans to have been the creators of the whole entire culture. This is something that is rooted in white supremacy because it goes back to the beginning. That's what's always been happening in this country. So that's the response you're gonna get. So what if somebody says you Jamaicans didn't make nothing? It's a response to that.
And then that response is going to have a response in.
That's fine, but you need to look at the root. Hold on. You need to look. Hold on. You need to look at the root. You need to look at the root. The root of the problem is here in this country where Black Americans are being attacked. We're not in Jamaica. We're in the United States where this has been happening to us.
And that's
for generations.
Why
So when you come here, hold on. So when you come here and you participate in that, that's the problem. When Dr. Cologne comes here and participates in that, that's the problem.
But you see,
all right, now hold on. This is why, hold on a second, hold on. This is why I don't come on the live, because I don't want to start yelling and I want to keep it calm. I know I'm yelling, hold on. And I want to keep it calm and keep my family together and everybody at peace. But this is why I like to use text so I can get my point across perfectly. No. So that's why I'm going to sign off and you can say whatever you want.
It doesn't work though. That's the thing. So the thing that I was trying to get across to you is that I'm responding to what's responding to us. Now, here's the thing. American media distorts everybody's culture. Everybody. Not just Black Americans, everybody. You know, like I mentioned often, I'm a dancer. Okay, I do Egyptian dance. If you look in the media, you never see Egyptian culture or any Middle Eastern culture accurately represented. They don't get the dress right. They don't get the music right. They don't get nothing right. This mainstream culture disrespects and distorts everybody's heritage. Everybody. As a Jamaican, is my culture represented properly in media? Hell no. Every time I see a movie or something that's set in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, I have to grit my teeth because I know they're gonna fuck it up. They do the same thing with Latino culture. They're all the same. They don't know the difference between a Brazilian, a Mexican, and a Puerto Rican. They think it's all the same. They do the same shit to all of us. So that's the problem. But if someone makes an inaccurate statement, you deal with that individual. You don't go and then shit on the entire community. And that's my point. That's the issue that I have with so-called FBA people. You don't take the people who write those books to task. That's what you should do. You should call those people out. But instead, you all shit on the entire culture. In my last video that I dropped before I did this live, I pointed out that Jamaicans, yes, we borrowed influences from African Americans and other people as well. But what we created was uniquely ours. And that's the point that I make, that when Cologne is talking about the Latin influences in American music, that in no way, shape, or form takes anything away from African Americans, because it was those African Americans who took those elements and they created it. They crafted it on their own terms and added it into their own music. Yes, Cologne does know it. He says it. He admits it. He knows it. So we're not trying to take anything away from African Americans, but the thing that came to us, well, what elements from your culture went into this? So he said, well, those percussions, they came from our culture. That's what it is. But we're not trying to say, those of us who were really there, we're not trying to say that Jamaicans created hip hop. We're not trying to say that hip hop came out of Jamaica. Those are outsiders that don't know what the fuck they're talking about, or certain individuals. Look, I don't know why the fuck Busta Rhymes said what he said. But at the same token, I don't put much stock in what celebrities say, because they're notorious for saying dumb shit all the time. I don't really take them seriously like that. So when Busta said what he said, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? No. We made our contributions to the evolution of the thing, but it didn't come out of Jamaica. And I know that for a fact because I grew up in Jamaica. I left Jamaica in 1976 and I came here to the States, came back. So I know what was happening down in Jamaica and I know what was happening here. We wasn't doing hip hop in Jamaica. We wasn't writing graffiti. We wasn't up rocking. We wasn't breaking. We wasn't doing none of that. Okay? This thing developed here in the United States, in the Bronx, and then the rest of New York City. And the people who were involved in it came from different ethnic backgrounds. That's just a fact. And yes, there are certain elements that they did bring from their cultures. Like, for example, with the Latinos, those instruments and those percussions made their way into every genre of American music. So when these hip hop DJs are sampling those breaks that were made by those Black American and some white American artists already had those Latin influences in them. It doesn't mean that that was Latin music. That's not what we're saying.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
What does those instruments put Puerto Ricans?
Say that again.
What does instruments put Puerto Ricans into hip hop?
Okay, say it again, like a little bit louder.
How those Cuban instruments put Puerto Ricans into hip hop? How does that happen? Because those instruments from Cuba, not Puerto Rico.
Okay, because, I'll explain this to you. It doesn't come directly from Cuba itself. It comes from Cuba to New York. And here's the thing, Cubans and Puerto Ricans even before they came to New York, there was a lot of interaction between Puerto Ricans and Cubans back in the Caribbean. And that intensified when they came up here to New York. So in a lot of these bands that were being led by, Cubans, a lot of the musicians were Puerto Rican. They were also musicians who were African American. And it went the other way around too. So you had a lot of the jazz bands that had Puerto Ricans and Cubans working in there too. So there's a big collaboration. So the Puerto Ricans were, salsa music is a combination of different things. There's some Puerto Rican elements in it from their own folklore. There's a heavy Cuban influence in it. They mix some jazz in it. That's why they call it salsa. Because salsa is a sauce. A sauce is a mixture of different things, and that's why they called it salsa.
But Mario Bowser, and he said that there's no such thing as Latin. He said he's not Latin. He says people are Afro-Cuban. He don't know what to get that Latin from.
Well,
he also said this. He said they always make everything Cuban, everything salsa. It's Cuban music. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
it's not salsa. He said this out of his own mouth. I'm not saying this.
I know, but okay. Let me
said it. Hold up. He said that. He said we are not Latin. He said they're Afro-Cuban. They don't know where to get the Latin stuff from.
Can I speak to that now?
Yeah.
All right. So this is where, this is an issue of semantics. And, like I tried to explain to people, and, the people in the chat, like TT Juju, she can vouch for this. This umbrella term that we came up with, Latino, they didn't create this term themselves. These are terms that were applied to them. These are terms that were imposed on them. But when we use that term Latino or Hispanic, what it's speaking to is not, for want of a better term, the race of the individual. We're talking to the language group. So within the language group of people called Latino, you have people who have a mixture of African, European, and Native American background. Some people might have a majority European ancestry. Some people might have a majority African ancestry. But they're being grouped together based on a language. And this is something that the United States government imposed on the people who came here from those countries. That's not what they call themselves. So when let me finish. When Mario Bauza says we're not Latin, he's rejecting that classification that was created by the United States government. But when we say that in general, the understanding is, the context and the understanding is that we're talking about those African elements that come from these different countries. So you have Latin, you have people who say, I'm not Latin, I'm Native American. I'm not Latin, I'm African. So all of that is part of the mix. So that's the way Mario Bauza identifies himself. But he's not cutting himself off from other Cubans. Okay, this is something that they created on their own terms. Okay, so when we're talking about Latin instruments, we're not talking about instruments that come from Spain. We're talking about the instruments that were created there by those African descended Cubans who speak Spanish, which is a Latin-based language. That's what, you understand where I'm coming from? That's the thing.
What I'm saying is to you, we can show the history of how we evolved. Hip hop came out of our culture. A lot of them can't show that. We talk about Puerto Ricans. They can't show that. This is why most of them start off with rock bands, and then it goes to breaking. But what I'm saying to you is this: that's true. Then we can show those dances been here.
Okay, so as far as the dances go, there's an evolution. Okay?
We have that. We have that.
Okay, so listen, the point I'm making is that it didn't happen in a vacuum. Because like if we go back to rockin', for example, all right?
Go back to what?
They were Puerto Ricans here, and once again, this is here in the United States. Puerto Ricans were rocking. Okay, we had prior to this, we're talking about now the late 60s, early 70s. Well, we go back 5 years before that, we're just ending a very heavy cultural influence coming from, the mambo era and the cha-cha-cha. And African Americans were very much in the mix there too, because, for example, clubs like the Palladium were one of the few places where there was no segregation. There were a lot of African Americans that were down with that too. So all of these elements are being mixed. There's elements coming from, and like I said before, if we say that African Americans were there too, it just stands to reason that African Americans brought something with them. But here's the thing, they mixed those elements. So Latin people saw what African Americans were doing. They brought their own influences and they mixed that with what they're doing too. And here's the other thing you got to understand. Because of the African slave trade, you have things happening parallel in different locations. So there's things that you can see happening in the African American community, and you see something similar happening in Puerto Rico. You see something similar happening in Jamaica at the same time. So there's certain things that we all share in common. The way we move our bodies, we share that in common, because Europeans don't move the way we do, that loose spine. They're stiff. We move our entire bodies. We articulate our whole bodies. So that's why when we hear each other's music, it's like there's something in it that we can relate to. It feels familiar to us because there's a common root there that we're picking up on.
You're telling the truth about what you're saying. We all move a certain way. But here's the problem I got with Cologne and his Randy and them. They're trying to separate black Americans from black Americans outside New York. We're all the same. We're family here. You can't separate it. Now that's being very deceptive.
Okay.
They've been very deceptive. Yeah, they've been very deceptive about separating black Americans, you know what I'm saying, from outside New York. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's not the same. No, we come as one. We're all from the South. We all speak the slang. We all come from some lineage. How these people try to separate us and do something around, turn around? But they separate from Puerto Rico? And the Puerto Ricans disrespect them, say they're not real Puerto Rican. We hear it all the time. Oh, they New Ricans. They're not from Puerto Rico. We don't do that. We here in North America, our lineage been here for thousands of years. And I will prove that to you, that we've been here for thousands of years. I don't go by my opinion, but what I'm saying is, you can't separate my country from down south. And that's what they're doing. You can't do that.
Okay, so my understanding of where they're coming from, look, like I keep saying, there are cultural elements that African Americans have, but what was created in New York was something different that didn't really exist in that form before. And to me personally, if you're going to say that this came from the South, you're taking credit away from those African Americans who made those innovations in New York. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so for example, people make the mistake, and I'm going on record again publicly, make the mistake of saying that rapping came from Jamaican toasting. I think that's a mistake. That's a coincidence, and I'll explain to you why. Basically, rapping and toasting, we have spoken word over a beat. But you see, the way we were doing it in Jamaica was very different than what happened in hip hop, okay? That genre was already fully formed and established by the late 60s, early 70s. With hip hop music, rapping was the last element to come in. And we can see a progression from where it starts, and somewhere in the mid 70s, it starts with, people like Coke La Rock, just making, little statements and short little rhymes on the mic. And then it develops. By the time you get to like Melly Mel and his crew, now you got like actual full form bars. So rapping didn't come into the music fully formed from day one. If it had come directly from Jamaican toasting, it would have already been established from day one. It wasn't. It was a progression, and you can see that progression. So those MCs, those African American MCs, that's what they did. And that's not saying that African Americans didn't have rhyming before. They did, but the way they did it was something that was unique that the world had never seen before. And that's why it blew up the way it did. Yes, it was taking old materials, but they recycled it and made something new and something that was fresh and unique. And that's why when people heard it, they were yelling, yo, what is this?
So was blues, so was Motown, so was blues, so was Motown. Okay, I wasn't born in Detroit. All right, I wasn't born in Detroit, but that's my language. That comes from my culture. Okay.
Yes, but blues. Okay, but blues. Okay, how do I put this? Every genre has its own unique identity.
Yes.
So yes, you pull influences from here and from there and from there, but it doesn't mean that it's identical. Hip hop music is not funk. Hip hop music is not disco. Hip hop music is not rock. But hip hop music pulled on those elements. They recycled. It's like a patchwork quilt. You take these pieces of elements and then you put together something new, or you got, like some old curtains. You got some old bedspreads, and you take pieces from here and pieces there, and then you put them together and it forms something new. So what these kids in the Bronx back then did, they pulled on all these different elements and they created something that was fresh and new and unique. So once again, it's a matter of perspective and how you are looking at it. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong, but it depends on how you look at it. And see, that's why I don't have a problem, because I can look at something from multiple angles and see, okay, I understand where you're coming from. And I'm not bothered by it. I don't make a big deal, because I can understand, all right, the reason why he's saying that is because he's looking at it from this perspective. And that's true. And somebody else, they have a different perspective and say, okay, I can understand because they're looking at it from this way. And that's true. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of, from everything that I'm looking at, that I'm learning, I'm saying to myself, something, what's going on here is that everybody has a piece of the puzzle. Everybody's got a piece of the puzzle. It's not necessarily that people are wrong or that they're lying or whatever, but they have their own experiences. They have their own perspectives, and those perspectives are piece of a much larger picture. So what has to happen is that people have to come together, and there's got to be like a sit down, a round table, and people can discuss it. And then we can have a fuller idea, because from what I'm seeing, there's so much confusion. When people say hip hop, they all have different ideas of what hip hop is. Even with a term like b-boy, you ask 5 different people what b-boy means, they got 5 different explanations. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong or they're lying or whatever. They just got a different perspective. And the reason why it's so hard to pin this thing down is because in its essence, we're talking about something that at the end of the day was made by kids who were living in the moment. And they wasn't taking notes. They didn't know what the fuck was going to happen next year, let alone what was going to happen 50 years from now. None of us knew that this thing was going to blow up and take the world by storm. We were clueless. We didn't know.
Ask you a question, then.
Yeah.
Why the black pioneers from the
Okay, get closer to your computer again, because you're fading out.
I said, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I said, why is it that the black pioneers from the Bronx saying they came out of Black American culture, and we don't see no Puerto Rican pioneers saying the same, like they came out of Puerto Rican culture? We don't hear that.
Say that again.
Why is it that we always hear Black American pioneers from the Bronx? They came out of Black American culture like Charlie Brown, but we don't see no Puerto Rican pioneers saying the same thing. They come out of Puerto Rico. Why we don't see that?
Because it didn't come out of Puerto Rico. It happened here in New York. There's a geographical discrepancy. This did not happen in Puerto Rico. It happened here in the Bronx. And then the rest of New York City.
Is the Bronx outside of North America?
It happened specifically in New York City, and then it's spread. No, it's not. But there are things, listen, there are things that are unique to each region. So this is what I'm saying. For example, Zydeco music, that don't come from New York. That comes from Louisiana, Texas. That's an aspect. That's an aspect.
We are the same people.
But yes, you're the same people. But in each region, those people have cultural aspects that are unique to that geographic location.
But we still American. It don't matter.
I'm not saying you're not, but you're not hearing what I'm saying. You're not hearing the point that I'm making. They have cultural aspects that are unique to that community, right? Yes, they're still all African Americans, but Zydeco does not come from New England. Gumbo does not come from New England. They got their own things up there. You see what I'm saying? Like when people over here in the Bronx in New York were doing up rock and breaking, Black Americans on the West Coast were doing popping, they were doing locking. We didn't create that here in New York. That started over there on the West Coast. That was unique to them. And we copied them.
Of course, you're right. It happened on the West Coast, but understand the same people. You're talking about the same people.
They're the same people. Nobody is denying that they're the same people. But what we're trying to show is that they have things. People in different locations have things that are unique to their location. Go-go music.
But you're talking about Black American culture, no matter what.
That's the umbrella. Now we're talking about the specific elements, okay? Go-go music. That's the official music of DC, not New York.
But it's still
not Atlanta. We know that. We're not disputing that.
Why is in the Bronx they trying to separate Black people?
Because just like Zydeco is what comes out of Louisiana, Texas, just like Gullah Geechee music and their speech is what's there in the Carolina Sea Islands, what they came up with in New York is their own unique thing. They're not separating themselves. Listen, they're not. But see, this is the problem. This is the problem. You're perceiving it as an attempt to separate, and that's not what it is.
Like, there's no culture in location. Culture comes from people.
Yes, but people in different locations have things that are specific to them and unique to them.
Culture comes from people.
Yes, but people have things in different locations that are unique to their specific situations.
Hey, you teacher, let me say something, brother. I agree with a lot of things that you say. All I'm saying is, brother, there's some people among all groups that have different opinions, right? You know,
yeah.
What I'm saying is, I feel you all, brother. You know what I'm saying? You are my brother. That's why I call you my brother. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
And I know the geography of what America is. America is not just North America. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people think America just here. No, you got Central America, South America, the two islands. Just the Americas. Okay? What I'm telling you is this. We all have our unique culture within the Americas. You know what I'm saying? You got unique culture amongst themselves. These still considered Black people, are they not?
Well, not everybody. Well, it all depends on how you define it. I understand your point.
We talk about Black Americans in North America, okay? Because I know about geographic. You understand that? Black American uniquely here in North America. Our music genre is co-created. We have no culture in music.
Well, nobody is denying that African Americans have their own culture, but the way things were put to us, they asked what came from your culture that's in Black American music, and so we said those Latin rhythms. But at the same time, like I point out, and Cologne has pointed out, but nobody want to hear it when he says it, that doesn't mean that those elements that were borrowed by those Motown musicians or whatever, that doesn't mean that it was Latin music. That just means that they borrowed those elements for flavor.
Okay, you know about Dizzy Gillespie and Mary Bowser, right? You're
Yeah.
speaking on Dizzy. All right, what I'm saying is this. If that's true, that's what helped create what you call Afro-Cuban jazz, Latin jazz. Am I right?
Say that again.
Mary Bowser and Dizzy Gillespie, that was called Afro-Cuban jazz. That's what Mary Bowser called it. Later on, became Latin jazz, right?
Afro-Cuban jazz, Latin jazz, same. We
Oh,
use
Mary
it interchangeably.
It's not Latin jazz. It's Afro-Cuban jazz. You want to be specific that his people created that.
But here's the thing, though. Everybody that knows about that music know that those rhythms, that flavor, is coming from an African foundation.
Yes, yeah, I'm glad you said that.
You all know that. Nobody does. Listen, it's just certain things that you don't need to really reiterate because it's just commonly known and it's common sense.
But you know,
Okay, when you hear them, listen, they're calling the names of the Orishas from Nigeria in a lot. Look, we all know, we all grew up watching I Love Lucy.
so
Right?
Let me ask you a question.
Let me ask you a question first.
Yeah.
You grew up watching I Love Lucy.
Of course, of course.
What was that song that Ricky Ricardo was singing that he's
I don't
famous?
remember the song, man.
Come on, man, like bullshit.
I'll tell you something. I watched a lot of that stuff growing up in the 70s.
Listen, you watch reruns. I don't want to hear that shit. You know, if I start singing
I watched a lot of Sanford's Son and Jefferson.
Babalu, you know Babalu, man. Come on. You know I Love Lucy and Babalu. Don't fucking bullshit me, man. Come on now.
I watched Lucy for the comedy. She was very comedy, man. She was, you know what I'm saying? And I watched
Okay, but the point that I'm trying to make though, Babalu is a Nigerian Orisha. That's coming straight out of Nigerian religion that survived in Cuba. So everyone knows that these rhythms are coming from Africa. We all know that. So whether you want to call it Afro-Cuban, Latin, everybody knows what the foundation there, what gave it that flavor. It's a mixture of African and European elements, but what gave it that special flavor was that African heartbeat. We all know that.
We don't deny our lineage from Africa, right? What I'm saying is this. Wow, people have their own different nationality culture come about in thousands of years. What I'm saying is people want to come over here and try to claim, you know what I'm saying, us here in North America, what we created. They try to make that claim. You can't make that claim. That's our creation. In Jamaica, that's their creation. We don't make no claim on nobody. What we're saying is this. What we create is ours. What you create is yours. No matter how you pick up that instrument, you pick up the drum and you did something with it, that's great. What we did with it was great too. But what we're saying is, all our music genres, there is no co-creation or our creation. Am I right?
It depends on what you're talking about. Because like I said, with, how do I put this? All right. There's no culture on the face of the earth that is free from influences from another culture. And that goes whether you're talking about Europe, anywhere in the world. Okay? Because even if you look at European music, any of their genres, if you trace it far back enough, you'll see that there's elements that came in from other non-European societies. For example, the guitar. Okay, the guitar is the baby of the Arabic oud. They got that from the Arabs, okay? Their music back in the Middle Ages, they borrowed from what the Arabs were doing. And from that, they developed their own music, blended it with whatever they had going on there. Everyone borrows. Okay?
But what I'm saying to you is this.
So listen, let me finish my thought. Even if you borrow an element from another culture, the fact that you incorporated it on your own terms and you put it in there, it's still your creation. Okay? You don't have to be afraid to acknowledge those outside influences, because it still doesn't change the fact that you made it. And then there's certain instances where you did have Latinos and African Americans working together on certain projects. You know, so you see that very clearly in a lot of the early hip hop songs where you had Latin musicians who came in and they were working with African American musicians. That happens. So that doesn't, listen, I'm going to say this because I got to go to the bathroom. I'm an old man with an enlarged prostate. Okay?
It's all good.
There is no way, shape, or form that you can take the contributions of African Americans out of anything in American culture. No way that they can be diminished or denied in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to run because my bladder is going to burst. But thank you for coming on. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Peace out.